The carriage door slammed shut behind her like the lid of a coffin. Elena Whitford pressed her back against velvet upholstery that cost more than her life was worth. Rainwater streaming from her hair onto silk cushions, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Outside, men were shouting her name. Inside, a woman with silver hair and eyes like cut glass studied her, the way a jeweler might study a flawed diamond, calculating whether it could be salvaged or should simply be discarded. "Please," Elena whispered, the stolen documents crumpling in her trembling hands. "Please, just let me." "You've made quite the entrance," the woman said, her voice glacial. "Now, let's discuss what you're worth." That's when Elena realized she hadn't escaped at all. She'd just walked into a different kind of trap. Welcome to a story of survival, power, and impossible choices. If you want to see how far Elena's desperate gamble takes her, and where in the world this tale reaches you, leave a comment with your city below, hit that like button, and stay until the very end, because what starts in rain and fear ends in fire and fortune. The rain came down like punishment. Elena had been running for 3 blocks, her boots, cheap leather, already splitting at the seams, slapping through puddles that reflected the gas-lit street lamps in fractured gold. Her lungs burned. The folder tucked under her coat was getting soaked despite her efforts, ink probably bleeding through the pages even now, rendering months of careful theft potentially useless. Behind her, she heard them. Lord Pembroke's men. 2, maybe 3 sets of footsteps, heavy and unhurried because they knew what she was learning with each desperate stride. There was nowhere to go. The capital, Ashenmere they called it, jewel of the eastern provinces, was beautiful in the daylight. At night, in a storm, with powerful men hunting you, it was a maze designed to swallow girls like her whole. She'd been so careful. 6 months working in Pembroke's household as a tutor to his idiot nephew, 6 months of smiling politely while the man's hand lingered too long on her shoulder, his breath hot against her neck when he stood too close. 6 months of slipping into his study after midnight, copying correspondence, financial records, evidence of bribes that would make half the parliament complicit in his schemes. She'd been so careful, and it had all gone to hell in a single evening. "Miss Whitford!" The voice echoed off wet cobblestones, syrupy with false courtesy. Marcus Vey, Pembroke's chief enforcer, a man who smiled while he broke fingers. "This is foolish. His lordship only wants to talk." Elena ducked into an alley, her shoulder slamming against brick. The impact sent pain radiating down her arm, but she swallowed the gasp. Talking. Right. Pembroke wanted to talk the same way wolves wanted to play with lambs. The alley was a dead end. Of course it was. She spun, looking for a window, a door, a loose board, anything. The walls were slick with rain and grime, windows barred or too high to reach. At the far end, she could see the street, see the carriages rolling past, indifferent to whatever small tragedies played out in the shadows. There she is. No more time. Elena ran toward the mouth of the alley, toward the men now blocking it, and at the last second veered hard left, straight into the street, directly into traffic. A horse screamed, hooves sparked against cobblestones. She felt the rush of air as a hansom cab swerved, the driver cursing in a language she didn't recognize. Then her hands found the door handle of a slowing carriage. Expensive, black lacquer, probably belonged to someone who'd have her arrested on principle. And she yanked it open and threw herself inside. The door slammed. She collapsed onto the seat, gasping, water pooling beneath her. "Drive," she shouted at the roof. "Please, just drive. I'll pay you. I don't believe you're in a position to give orders." Elena's head snapped up. The woman sitting across from her could have been carved from ice and aristocracy in equal measure. 60, perhaps. Though her face had the kind of preservation that came from never having worried about anything as vulgar as money. Silver hair pulled back in a style that probably required 3 servants. A traveling cloak of deep charcoal that made the shadows around her seem intentional. And eyes, pale gray, almost colorless, that pinned Elena to her seat more effectively than any restraint. Elena started. "You're dripping on Venetian velvet," the woman observed. "That's 500 crowns of upholstery you're currently ruining." Outside, Elena could hear shouting. Vey and his men, close now. "I'm sorry," Elena said, which was inadequate and stupid, but her mind was racing too fast for better words. "I didn't mean to. There were men chasing me, and I just needed to escape." The woman's tone didn't change. She might have been discussing the weather. Yes, I gathered that from the way you hurled yourself at a moving vehicle like a madwoman. A knock rattled the carriage door. Open up! Official business! Elena's breath stopped. The woman didn't even glance toward the sound. Instead, she raised one gloved hand and rapped her knuckles against the roof. 2 sharp strikes. The carriage lurched forward, wheels rolling over cobblestones. You can't! The man outside shouted, but his voice was already fading as they pulled away. Elena stared at her unlikely savior, unable to form words. The woman studied her in return, and Elena had the uncomfortable sensation of being catalogued, assessed, and filed away in some mental ledger. What's your name? The woman asked finally. Elena. Elena Whitford. Something flickered in those gray eyes. Recognition? No, something sharper. Interest. Whitford? The woman repeated, testing the weight of it. Daughter of Michael Whitford? Elena's throat went tight. You knew my father? Of him. He was a diplomat, wasn't he? Served in the northern campaigns before... She paused delicately. Before his unfortunate passing. 5 years ago now? 6. Elena's voice came out flat. 6. Elena's voice. She'd learned not to show emotion when discussing her father's death. People either pitied you or used it against you, and both responses were unbearable. My condolences. And what's a diplomat's daughter doing fleeing through the rain from men who smell distinctly of hired muscle? Elena looked down at the folder still clutched against her chest. Elena looked. The leather was dark with water, but the documents inside, maybe they'd survived. Maybe. I can't tell you that. Can't or won't. Does it matter? The woman's lips curved, barely. Not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement of a decent chess move. I suppose not, but you understand that I can't simply drop you at the nearest corner and wish you well. Those men aren't going to stop looking, and if they connect you to this carriage, to me, that becomes my problem. Elena's stomach dropped. I'll get out now. I won't tell anyone. Don't be stupid. You're already involved me, girl. The question now is what we do about it. The carriage turned, and through the rain-streaked window, Elena caught a glimpse of the river district, warehouses and shipping offices shut tight for the night. They were heading east, away from the fashionable quarters, toward... Where? Who are you? Elena asked. Catherine Ashford. The name was delivered without ceremony, but Elena felt her world tilt anyway. Everyone knew that name. Catherine Ashford, the Steel Widow, matriarch of one of the oldest families in Ashenmere. Her husband had died 20 years ago, leaving her with a shipping empire, 3 sons, and a reputation for ruthlessness that made grown men reconsider their business ventures. She didn't just play society politics. She invented half the rules. Lady Ashford, Elena breathed, I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. I never would have. Yes, you would have. Catherine's voice was brisk. You were desperate. Desperate people don't check social registers before throwing themselves at rescue. Now, let's try this again. What did you do to warrant that kind of pursuit? Elena's hands tightened on the folder. I stole something. Clearly. What? Information about Lord Pembroke. Evidence of, I guess you'd call it corruption, but that makes it sound cleaner than it is. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something in her posture sharpened. Conrad Pembroke? Yes. And you thought stealing from one of the most dangerous men in Parliament was a sensible course of action because he... Elena stopped, swallowed. Because someone needed to, and no one else was going to. Nobility of purpose. How refreshing. The sarcasm could have etched glass. And what exactly was your plan after you acquired this evidence? March it to the authorities? Sell it to his enemies? Frame it and hang it in your sitting room? I was going to take it to the Lord Chancellor's office, file a formal complaint. Catherine laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, utterly without humor. You sweet, idiotic child. Pembroke has half the Chancellor's staff in his pocket. You'd have been arrested before you finished signing your name to the documents. Then what was I supposed to do? The words came out harsher than Elena intended, frustration bleeding through fear. Just let him... She stopped again, jaw clenched. Let him what? Elena met those cold gray eyes and made a decision. If she was going to die tonight, and the odds were good that she would one way or another, she might as well tell the truth. There was a girl, 16, worked in the kitchens. Pembroke noticed her, and when she refused his attentions, she disappeared. They said she ran off, but I heard her crying the night before. I heard what he promised he'd do if she kept rejecting him. Elena's voice cracked. They found her in the river 3 days later. Accidental drowning, the report said. The carriage was silent except for the drumming rain and the muffled clatter of wheels. I see, Catherine said finally. And the documents you stole? Financial records, letters, proof that he's been embezzling military funds, taking bribes from foreign interests, blackmailing rivals. I thought if I couldn't get justice for her, at least I could destroy him for everything else. Revenge, then. Justice. There's less difference than you'd think. Catherine tilted her head, studying Elena with those unsettling eyes. Tell me something, Miss Whitford. If you could have anything right now, safety, money, revenge, whatever your heart desires most, what would it be? It was a test. Elena knew that. But she was too tired, too frightened, too angry to perform whatever dance Catherine expected. Survival, she said. I want to survive long enough to see Pembroke answer for what he did. Honest, at least. Catherine rapped on the roof again. The carriage slowed, turned. I'm going to make you an offer, Miss Whitford. You won't like it. In fact, you'll probably find it offensive, possibly horrifying. But before you refuse, and I can see that you're already preparing to refuse, I want you to consider your alternatives. Elena's mouth went dry. What kind of offer? The kind that solves both our problems. Catherine leaned forward, and the lamplight caught her face in sharp relief, all angles in calculation. I need a wife for my eldest nephew. You need to disappear from Pembroke's reach. I propose a marriage contract. The world seemed to stop. You can't be serious, Elena whispered. I'm never anything else. My nephew, Ronan Hale, the Duke of Greymore, has been living in isolation for the past 4 years. War injury, trauma, the usual complications of watching men die. He refuses every match I arrange, rejects every introduction, and is generally making himself into a social embarrassment. Catherine's tone suggested this was a personal affront to her management skills. You, meanwhile, are educated, well-bred enough to pass in decent company. And most importantly, you're sufficiently desperate that you might actually agree to this insanity. He's a duke, Elena said numbly. Why would he marry me? He won't have a choice. I control his inheritance until he marries or turns 40. He's 31. I suspect 9 more years of poverty and isolation will motivate him to sign whatever I put in front of him. You can't just force someone to... I can do quite a lot of things, Miss Whitford. The question is what you can stomach. Catherine sat back, her expression unreadable. Here are your options. I drop you at the next corner. You try your luck with Pembroke's men, and we both pretend this conversation never happened. Or you agree to marry Ronan. I provide you with a new identity and legal protection that even Pembroke can't touch. And in exchange, you give me a duchess and an heir to the Greymore estate. I don't even know him. Most aristocratic marriages start with less. At least this way you'll both be equally unhappy. Elena pressed her hands against her face. This couldn't be happening. This was insane. The entire night had been insane from the moment she'd grabbed those documents and run. What if I say no? She asked through her fingers. Then I admire your principles and wish you luck outrunning Pembroke. Elena lowered her hands. Catherine was watching her with the patience of a card player holding a winning hand, waiting for the opponent to realize they'd already lost. If I agree, Elena said slowly, I want conditions. Catherine's eyebrow rose, the first real expression of surprise Elena had seen. You want to negotiate? You said this solves both our problems. That means you need me as much as I need you. So yes. Conditions. For a long moment, Catherine just stared at her. Then, impossibly, she smiled. A real smile, sharp and approving. Go on. I want the marriage to be legal and binding. But I want it on paper that if either of us chooses to dissolve it after 1 year, we can. No scandal, no public humiliation, just a quiet annulment. Acceptable. though I doubt Ronan will last a year before begging for exactly that. I want access to funds. Not a fortune, but enough that I'm not completely dependent on your family's charity. A quarterly allowance, 500 crowns. 5 tem. Enough to live modestly if you're careful. 1,000. Catherine's smile widened. 750. And I'll throw in a legal advocate to help you navigate titled society without making an absolute fool of yourself. Done. Elena's heart was hammering, but her voice stayed steady. And one more thing. If I marry your nephew, I want your protection. Not just from Pembroke, from anyone who might use my past against me. I want your word that you'll destroy anyone who tries. That, Catherine said softly, I can promise you absolutely. She extended her hand. Elena looked at it, gloved, elegant, offering either salvation or damnation, possibly both, and after a heartbeat's hesitation, shook it. Welcome to the family, Miss Whitford, Catherine said. You're going to regret this. I already do. Good. That means you're not a complete fool. Catherine rapped on the roof. We're going to my estate. You'll stay there tonight, and tomorrow we'll begin the process of transforming you into someone worthy of a duke. I suggest you get some sleep. You're going to need it. Elena leaned back against the ruined velvet, her body finally starting to register the cold, the exhaustion, the sheer impossibility of the last hour. She was soaked to the bone. She'd just agreed to marry a stranger, and somewhere in Ashenmere, Pembroke's men were still searching for her. But she was alive. She was alive, and for the first time in 6 months, she had a weapon that wasn't just stolen papers and desperate hope. She had Catherine Ashford's protection. Now, she just had to survive meeting the man she'd agreed to marry. Eek. The Ashford estate sat on the western edge of the capital, far enough from the city center to have grounds, but close enough to feel the pulse of political power. Elena got her first look at it through the carriage window as they rolled up a tree-lined drive. A sprawling manor house, 3 stories of pale stone and leaded windows, lights burning in only a few rooms despite the late hour. Ronan isn't here, Catherine said, reading Elena's thoughts, or perhaps just her nervous glance at the house. He lives at Greymore up north, refuses to come to the capital, refuses most visitors, refuses to participate in anything resembling normal society. You'll meet him in 2 days, after we've made you presentable. 2 days? Elena's voice cracked. That's not enough time to… It'll have to be. The longer you're in Ashenmere without a new identity, the more likely Pembroke's people will track you down. We need to move quickly. The carriage stopped. A servant appeared, an older man with a face like weathered granite, and opened the door, offering Catherine his hand. She stepped down with the ease of someone who'd been doing this for 60 years. Elena followed, less gracefully. Her legs were shaking. This is Miss Whitford, Catherine told the servant. She'll be staying in the Rose Suite. Have Margot draw her a bath and find her something dry to wear. And burn those clothes. They're ruined. Yes, ma'am. The man didn't even blink at the sudden appearance of a bedraggled stranger. He turned to Elena. This way, miss. Elena shot one last look at Catherine, who was already heading toward the house, her cloak billowing behind her like a general leading troops. Lady Ashford? Elena called. Catherine paused, glanced back. Thank you, Elena said, for not throwing me out of the carriage. Thank me after you meet Ronan, Catherine replied. You might wish I had. Then she was gone, disappearing into the manor, and Elena was left standing in the rain with a servant who looked like he'd seen everything twice and been unimpressed both times. The Rose Suite is this way, he said, and started walking. Elena followed because what else was she going to do? The house was everything she'd expected, and worse. Soaring ceilings, paintings that probably cost more than her father's lifetime salary, furniture that looked like it would collapse if you sat on it wrong. The servant led her up a grand staircase, down a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashfords, and finally stopped at a door carved with, yes, of course, roses. Margot will be with you shortly, he said, and left her there. Elena pushed open the door. The room was bigger than the entire apartment she'd been renting in the city. Canopied bed, writing desk, sitting area with chairs upholstered in fabric that matched the roses on the door. A fire was already burning in the hearth, casting warm light across everything. She stood there dripping on an Aubusson rug and tried to process what she'd just agreed to. Marriage. To a duke. A duke she'd never met, who apparently hated people and lived in isolation and was being forced into this arrangement just as surely as she was. This was going to be a disaster. The door opened. A woman entered, 40-something, practical dress, sharp eyes that swept over Elena with the assessing gaze of someone used to managing problems. "I'm Margot," she said, "Lady Ashford's head of household. Let's get you out of those wet things before you catch pneumonia and ruin her plans." "Her plans?" Elena repeated, almost laughing. "Right. Can't have that." Margot's expression might have softened, fractionally. "Bath's ready. Leave the clothes outside the door and I'll have them dealt with. There's a nightgown on the bed. It'll be too big, but it'll do for tonight. We'll get you properly fitted tomorrow." She left, efficient as clockwork. Elena peeled off her sodden coat, her ruined dress, her boots that would never dry properly. The folder of documents she set carefully on the writing desk, trying not to think about whether the papers inside were still legible. Tomorrow's problem. The bath was heaven. Hot water, soap that smelled like lavender, a chance to wash away the fear and rain in Pembroke's men. She sank into it and let herself stop moving, stop planning, stop running for just a few minutes. When the water started to cool, she climbed out, dried off, and pulled on the nightgown Margot had left. It was indeed too big, pooling around her feet, but it was clean and soft, and someone else's problem to fix. She should sleep. She should collapse into that massive bed and try to store up rest for whatever hell tomorrow would bring. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the grounds, at the gardens barely visible in the darkness, at the lights of Ashenmere glowing in the distance. Somewhere out there, Pembroke was furious. His men were searching, and in 2 days, she was going to meet the man she'd agreed to marry in exchange for survival. A duke who'd been broken by war. A marriage that was really just a business transaction. A life that would be built on lies and necessity. Elena pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. "What have I done?" she whispered to the empty room. The room, predictably, didn't answer, but somewhere in the house below, she could hear Catherine Ashford's voice, crisp and commanding, giving orders to servants, making arrangements, setting pieces on a board that Elena was only beginning to understand. And Elena knew, with the cold certainty of someone who'd already gambled everything and lost, that there was no going back now. She was in this, whatever this was. All she could do was try to survive it, again. Morning came too early and with too much efficiency. Margot appeared at 7, followed by a girl carrying breakfast, tea, toast, eggs that Elena was too nervous to eat, and an announcement that Lady Ashford expected her downstairs at 8. "For what?" Elena asked. "Evaluation," Margot said, which was not reassuring. At precisely 8 o'clock, Elena found herself standing in what Margot called the morning room, south-facing windows, sunlight pouring in, furniture arranged in a way that suggested this was where Catherine conducted the business of managing other people's lives. Catherine herself was already there, seated at a small desk, reviewing papers with the focus of a general planning a campaign. She looked up as Elena entered. "Better," she said, which Elena assumed was a compliment. The dress Margot had provided was simple but well-made, dark blue with minimal ornamentation. "Sit." Elena sat. Catherine set down her papers and folded her hands. "We have 48 hours to make you into someone who can plausibly be a duchess. That means teaching you how to move, how to speak, how to manage servants, how to navigate a formal dinner without embarrassing yourself or me. It's going to be intensive and unpleasant. Do you understand?" "I'm not an idiot," Elena said. "I know how to behave in polite company." "Do mars Jan. You know how to behave as a tutor in a lord's household. That's not the same thing. A tutor can fade into the background. A duchess cannot." Catherine stood, walked to the window, looked out at the grounds. Ronan's title comes with expectations. The Greymore Duchy is old, older than most of the families currently running Parliament. It has lands, holdings, obligations. You'll be responsible for managing the household, hosting events, representing the family and society. You can't do that if you don't know the rules. Then teach me." Catherine turned back, something like approval in her expression. "We'll start with posture. Stand." Elena stood. Shoulders back, chin up. "You're not begging for scraps at someone's table anymore. You're the table. When you walk into a room, you own it. Show me. Elena walked across the room, trying to embody whatever Catherine wanted. Elena walked. Better. Again. More confidence. You're not asking permission to exist, but... Again, and again, and again, until Elena's spine ached and her jaw hurt from clenching, and Catherine finally nodded. That'll do for now. Sit. We need to discuss Ronan. Elena sank gratefully back into her chair. What about him? He's not going to make this easy. 4 years ago, he was one of the most eligible bachelors in society. Handsome, charming, every mother's dream for her daughter. Then he went to war, came back. Different. He won't talk about what happened out there, but whatever it was, it broke something in him. He shut down the Graymore estate house in the capital, moved permanently to the Northern Manor, and refuses most visitors. I see him twice a year if I'm lucky, and even then he barely tolerates my presence. He sounds delightful. Catherine's lips twitched. He's damaged. There's a difference. The man he was is still in there somewhere, buried under trauma and isolation. Your job isn't to fix him, it's to survive being married to him long enough that we both get what we need. And what exactly do you need? Elena asked. You keep saying this solves your problem, but you haven't explained what that problem is. The Graymore line is dying. Ronan has no heir, no wife, no prospects of either. If he dies without children, the title and all its holdings revert to the crown. 20 generations of Hale family history, gone. I won't allow that. Catherine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. You're going to give him a reason to rejoin society, even if it's just enough to produce an heir and secure the succession. You want me to have his child. Eventually. First, I want you to stay alive and married for more than a week. Elena's stomach twisted. This was real. This was actually happening. In 2 days, she was going to meet a war-traumatized duke, marry him, and somehow pretend this was normal. What if he refuses? She asked. What if he takes one look at me and says no? He won't have that option. The marriage contract is ironclad. He marries you or he loses everything. I've already had my solicitors draw up the papers. That's monstrous. That's survival. Welcome to aristocracy, Miss Whitford. We eat our own, and we do it with impeccable table manners. Catherine returned to her desk, pulled out a thick folder. This is everything you need to know about the Graymore Duchy. Its history, holdings, key staff, political alliances, and enemies. You have until tomorrow evening to memorize it. Elena took the folder. It weighed about 5 pounds. Tomorrow evening? We leave for Graymore at dawn the day after. The wedding will take place immediately upon arrival. I'm not giving Ronan time to argue. After that, you're on your own. I'll visit periodically to ensure you haven't been murdered or driven mad. But the day-to-day reality of being Ronan's wife? That's your problem. Elena opened the folder, scanned the first page. Family tree, going back 200 years. Holdings in 6 provinces. Annual income that made her head spin. Why me? She asked quietly. You could have had your pick of any woman in society. Why choose someone you found fleeing through the rain? Catherine was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, quieter, almost honest, because everyone else would do it for the title, the money, the social position. They'd see a broken duke and think project or prize. And you? You're doing this because you have no other choice. That means you might actually be real with him. And that, she paused, that might be what he needs. Before Elena could respond, Margot appeared in the doorway. Lady Ashford? The dressmaker is here, so excellent. Miss Whitford, you're about to be measured for more clothing than you've owned in your entire life. Try not to look terrified. It's unbecoming. The next 36 hours blurred into an exhausting parade of lessons, fittings, and information. Elena learned how to enter a room with presence, how to manage servants without being cruel or weak, how to eat a 9-course meal without stabbing herself with the wrong fork. She memorized the names of Graymore's key staff, its political allies and enemies, the delicate web of obligations and debts that came with being a duke. The dressmaker, a severe woman named Heloise, outfitted her with traveling clothes, day dresses, evening gowns, and most mortifyingly, A wedding dress that cost more than Elena's father had made in a year. It's too much, Elena protested when she saw it. It's sufficient, Catherine corrected. You're marrying a duke, not attending a country tea party. The dress should reflect that. By the evening before their departure, Elena's head was swimming with rules and names and expectations. She retreated to her room, ostensibly to rest, actually to panic in private. The folder Catherine had given her lay open on her desk. She'd been through it twice, but she kept coming back to one section, Ronan's military record. Captain Ronan Hale, it read, served in the Northern Campaign, 3rd Regiment, decorated for valor at the Siege of Black Ridge. Discharged following injuries sustained in... The rest was redacted. Just blank space where the explanation should be. What had happened to him out there? What kind of injury turned a charming nobleman into a recluse? Elena traced the edge of the page, uneasy settling in her stomach. Tomorrow she would find out. A knock at the door made her jump. Come in, me. Margot entered, carrying a small wooden box. Lady Ashford asked me to give you this. Elena took the box, opened it. Inside was a ring, old gold, set with a dark blue stone that caught the lamplight. It's the Graymore betrothal ring, Margot explained. Been in the family for 8 generations. You'll wear it tomorrow. Elena slipped it on. It fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. Like fate had decided she belonged here, wearing dead women's jewelry, marrying a stranger. Margot, she said as the woman turned to leave. What's he like? Ronan, I mean. Have you met him? Margot paused at the door. Once, 3 years ago, when Lady Ashford forced him to attend a dinner here in the capital. He was polite, distant, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She hesitated. But he wasn't cruel. Not to the staff. At least, that counts for something. It wasn't much, but it was something to hold on to. After Margot left, Elena stood at the window again, looking out at the darkness, at the life she was leaving behind. Somewhere out there, Pembroke was still hunting her. The girl from the river was still dead. The world was still dangerous and unfair and brutal. But tomorrow, Elena would have a name that meant protection, power, safety. All she had to do was marry a man who didn't want her and pretend this was somehow normal. She touched the ring, feeling its weight. Michael Whitford's daughter, she whispered to her reflection. What would you think of me now? Her father, who taught her to value honor and truth and standing up for what was right. Her father, who died believing those things mattered. Elena wondered what he'd say if he could see her now, trading herself for survival, marrying for protection, becoming exactly the kind of person who played society's games instead of fighting them. Then she remembered the girl in the river, and Pembroke's smile, and the way power always won unless you were willing to become power yourself. I'm sorry, she said to the ghost of her father's memory, but I'm choosing to live. The ring gleamed in the lamplight, beautiful and binding. Tomorrow, she would put on a wedding dress and marry a stranger. Tomorrow, Elena Whitford would cease to exist, and the Duchess of Graymore would take her place. She just had to hope she survived long enough to make it matter. The carriage lurched over a particularly rough patch of road, and Elena's stomach lurched with it. They'd been traveling north for 6 hours, the landscape gradually shifting from Ashenmere's manicured estates to wilder country. Rolling hills, dense forests, stone walls that looked older than memory. Catherine sat across from her, reading correspondence as if they were on a pleasant afternoon outing rather than racing toward a forced marriage. She hadn't spoken in over an hour, which left Elena alone with her thoughts and the growing knot of dread in her chest. How much farther? Elena asked, breaking the silence. Catherine didn't look up from her letter. Another hour, perhaps 2, depending on the roads. And when we arrive? The ceremony will take place in the estate chapel. I've arranged for a priest, witnesses, everything legally necessary. You'll sign the documents, exchange vows, and become the Duchess of Graymore before sunset. She finally glanced up, her expression unreadable. I suggest you use the remaining time to prepare yourself mentally. Ronan won't make this pleasant. You keep saying that, but you haven't actually explained what that means. It means he'll be cold, probably hostile. He'll resent you, resent me, resent the entire situation. Don't take it personally. He'd hate anyone I forced him to marry. That's incredibly reassuring. I'm not here to reassure you. I'm here to ensure this happens. Catherine returned to her letter, conversation apparently over. Elena turned to the window, watching the unfamiliar terrain roll past. Somewhere back in Ashenmere, Pembroke's men were still searching. By now, he probably knew she'd vanished completely, along with his documents. She wondered what he was doing about it. Men like Pembroke didn't accept losses gracefully. The ring on her finger felt heavy. She twisted it absently, a nervous habit she'd developed over the past 2 days. "Stop fidgeting," Catherine said without looking up. "Duchesses don't fidget." Elena forced her hand still and tried to breathe normally. This was fine. Everything was fine. She was just about to marry a traumatized stranger in a forced ceremony orchestrated by his manipulative aunt. Completely normal. Nothing to worry about. The trees grew thicker as they traveled deeper north, creating a canopy that filtered the afternoon sun into scattered gold. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper, like stone and pine and winter, even though it was barely autumn. This was old country, the kind that had been here long before nobles carved it into estates and claimed ownership. Finally, the carriage turned onto a private drive. Through the trees, Elena caught her first glimpse of Greymore. It wasn't a manor house. It was a fortress pretending to be one. Stone walls 3 feet thick, narrow windows that looked more defensive than decorative, towers at each corner that still bore the scars of some ancient siege. Whatever family built this place had expected trouble and built accordingly. "Cheerful," Elena muttered. "It's practical," Catherine replied. "The Hales have held this land for 300 years precisely because Greymore is nearly impossible to take by force. During the succession wars, it was besieged twice and never fell. And now I'm going to live here. Yes, try to sound less miserable about it." The carriage rolled to a stop in a courtyard that could have held a small army. The main doors, massive oak reinforced with iron, remained firmly closed. No servants appeared to greet them. The entire place felt abandoned. Catherine's jaw tightened, the first real sign of irritation Elena had seen. "He's being petulant. How predictable." She rapped sharply on the carriage roof. Her driver appeared, a man who looked like he'd spent his youth breaking people in half for money. "Thomas, inform the Duke that we've arrived. Tell him if he doesn't open these doors in the next 5 minutes, I'll have them broken down and send him the repair bill." Thomas nodded and strode toward the entrance. He knocked, 3 heavy blows that echoed across the courtyard. Nothing happened. He knocked again, louder. "Perhaps he's not home," Elena suggested, clinging to a desperate hope. "He's home. He's just being difficult." Catherine climbed out of the carriage with the brisk efficiency of someone deeply annoyed. "Come, we're not standing in the courtyard like beggars." Elena followed, her legs stiff from hours of sitting. The courtyard was immaculate, no weeds between the stones, no debris, but utterly empty. It felt wrong, like a stage set waiting for actors who'd never arrive. Thomas knocked a 3rd time. "Lord Hale, Lady Ashford requests entry." For a long moment, nothing. Then, finally, the sound of heavy bolts being drawn back. The door swung inward, revealing a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing a housekeeper's practical dress. Her expression suggested she'd rather be literally anywhere else. "Lady Ashford," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "We weren't expecting—" "Yes, you were. I sent word 3 days ago." Catherine swept past her into the entrance hall. "Where is he?" "The library. But my lady, he's asked not to be." "I don't care what he's asked. Miss Whitford, come along. Mrs. Bramble, have someone bring our luggage to the guest wing, and send word to the chapel that we'll need the priest within the hour." Mrs. Bramble's eyes widened slightly as she looked at Elena, taking in the traveling dress, the betrothal ring, the implications. "My lady, if you're planning what I think, then you're finally demonstrating some intelligence. The library, Mrs. Bramble, where is it?" "East wing, 2nd floor." But Catherine was already walking, her footsteps sharp against stone floors. Elena hurried after her, trying not to gawk at the interior of Greymore. It was exactly what she'd expected from the outside. Stone walls, high ceilings, minimal decoration. Functional rather than beautiful. Weapons hung on the walls, old armor stood in alcoves, everything designed to remind visitors that this was a military stronghold first and a home second. They climbed a staircase worn smooth by centuries of use. At the top, Catherine turned left without hesitation, leading them down a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced Hales. At the end, double doors stood closed. Catherine didn't knock. She simply opened them and walked in. The library was the first room Elena had seen that felt lived in. Books covered every wall from floor to ceiling, more books than Elena had seen outside a university. A fire burned in a massive hearth, and at a desk by the window, surrounded by papers and what looked like military maps, sat a man who didn't bother to look up at their entrance. "Get out," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "Good afternoon to you as well, Ronan," Catherine replied, utterly unruffled. "I've brought someone you need to meet. I don't care who you've brought. I said get out." "I'm afraid that's not possible. We've come a long way and we have business to conclude." Finally, he looked up. Elena got her first clear look at the Duke of Greymore, and her breath caught. Catherine had said he had been handsome once. He still was, in a harsh, unfinished way. Strong features, dark hair that needed cutting, eyes the color of winter storms. But there was a scar running from his left temple down to his jaw, pale against tanned skin, and the way he held himself suggested someone who'd learned that the world was full of things that wanted to kill you and planned accordingly. Those storm-colored eyes swept over Elena, cold and assessing, then dismissed her entirely. "Whatever scheme you're running, Catherine, I'm not interested. This isn't a scheme. It's a solution to our mutual problem." "I don't have a problem. You're 31, unmarried, and living like a hermit in a fortress. That's several problems." Catherine gestured at Elena. "This is Elena Whitford, your future wife." "Wallo soy ishinits." Ronan stood slowly. He was tall, Elena noticed distantly. Tall and broad-shouldered and looking at her like she was something unpleasant he'd found on his boot. "No," he said simply. "Yes," Catherine countered. "The marriage contract is already drawn. The ceremony is scheduled for this evening. You can cooperate and make this civilized, or you can fight me and make it ugly. Either way, it's happening." "The hell it is." He rounded the desk, moving with a slight limp Elena hadn't noticed at first. "I told you the last time you tried this. I'm not interested in your matchmaking games." "This isn't matchmaking. This is ensuring the Greymore line continues. Then find another Hale to carry it on. I'm done." "You're the Duke? There is no other option." Catherine's voice sharpened. "And need I remind you what happens if you refuse? The inheritance clause is quite clear. Marry before 40 or forfeit everything. You'll be penniless, titleless, and living on my charity. Is that what you want?" Ronan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Rage, maybe, or bitter resignation. "You're enjoying this. I'm doing what's necessary. There's a difference." Catherine moved to stand beside Elena. "Miss Whitford is well-bred, educated, and willing. Those are better qualifications than most arranged marriages can claim. Be grateful I'm giving you someone with a functioning brain." "I don't want someone with a brain. I don't want anyone." Elena had been silent through this entire exchange, feeling like a piece of furniture being negotiated over. But that last statement, the raw bitterness in it, finally pushed her past her fear. "Neither do I," she said. Both of them turned to stare at her. "I'm sorry?" Catherine's tone was dangerously quiet. Elena met Ronan's eyes. "I don't want to marry you either. This whole situation is absurd and humiliating, and I'd rather be literally anywhere else. But here we are, both of us being forced into this by circumstances and your aunt's manipulation. So perhaps instead of posturing at each other, we could acknowledge that we're equally trapped and figure out how to survive it." Silence. Ronan was looking at her now, really looking, like she'd become visible for the first time. "Who are you?" he asked slowly. "I told you," Catherine started. "Not you, her." He kept his eyes on Elena. "Who are you really? Because Catherine doesn't do charity, which means you're here for a reason." Elena lifted her chin, channeling every lesson Catherine had drilled into her over the past 2 days. "I'm a diplomat's daughter who made some powerful enemies and needed to disappear. Your aunt offered me protection in exchange for solving her succession problem. So yes, I'm using you. And yes, you're using me. At least we can be honest about it." Something almost like respect crossed Ronan's face. Then it was gone, replaced by that cold dismissal. Catherine, a word. Alone. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Miss Whitford. Fine. This isn't happening. I don't care what contracts you've drawn up or what threats you're making. You can't force me to marry someone. Actually, I can. The inheritance clause gives me full authority over your affairs until you marry or turn 40. That means I can make this decision for you. That clause was meant to prevent me from squandering the estate, not to let you play matchmaker with my life. And yet, here we are. Catherine's smile was sharp as glass. The priest arrives in 45 minutes. I suggest you both use that time to make peace with reality. She turned and walked out, leaving Elena and Ronan alone in the suddenly too quiet library. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire crackled. Outside, birds called to each other in the gathering dusk. I'm sorry, Elena said finally. I know this isn't what you wanted. You don't know anything about what I want. Ronan returned to his desk, but he didn't sit. Instead, he braced his hands against the wood, his back to her. How much is she paying you? Excuse me? Catherine, to go through with this farce, what's your price? Elena's hands clenched into fists. Protection from a lord who is going to kill me for exposing his crimes. That's what I'm getting. Not money. Survival. He turned, studying her. Pembroke? She blinked. How did you... Your name? Michael Whitford's daughter. I heard about his death. Diplomatic complications, they called it. But everyone knew it was Pembroke cleaning up loose ends. His expression was unreadable. You went after him. He killed a girl, 16 years old. I had evidence. And now you need to hide. Ronan's laugh was harsh. So Catherine offers you a title and protection. You agree to produce an heir, and I'm expected to cooperate with this arrangement like a stud horse. Perfect. I offered her conditions, Elena shot back, including an annulment option after 1 year. If you can tolerate me that long, you'll be free of both of us, me and your aunt's interference. That caught his attention. An annulment clause? Binding and legal. 1 year from the wedding date, either of us can dissolve this marriage with no scandal. I insisted on it. You negotiated with Catherine Ashford. He sounded almost impressed. You're either very brave or very stupid. Desperate. The word you're looking for is desperate. Ronan moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. The scar on his face looked deeper in the flickering light. You know what they say about me? That I'm broken, mad, dangerous. And you still agreed to this. I know what they say about you. I also know that everything they say is filtered through people who've never met you, never fought in a war, never... She stopped, choosing her words carefully. I'm not here to fix you or save you or whatever Catherine thinks will happen. I'm here because it's this or die. So if we're both trapped, maybe we can at least not make each other miserable. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, almost curious. Whitford, your father served in the northern campaigns. Yes, I knew him. Briefly. Ronan's jaw tightened. Battle of Cairn Ridge. He negotiated a ceasefire that saved half my regiment. We would have been slaughtered otherwise. Elena's throat went tight. He never talked about the war. Most of us don't. He turned to face her fully. He was a good man, honorable. You have his eyes. The unexpected kindness of it nearly broke her composure. She'd been operating on fury and terror for so long that simple human recognition felt dangerous. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. I'm still not marrying you. Then you're an idiot. The words came out sharper than intended, but Elena was past caring. Your aunt is going to destroy you if you refuse. She'll take everything. The title, the estate, your independence. And for what? Pride? Stubbornness? The luxury of suffering alone? You don't understand. You're right. I don't. I don't understand having the privilege to refuse help when it's offered. I don't understand choosing to lose everything rather than accept an inconvenient solution. But then again, I'm just a desperate woman trading herself for survival, so what do I know? She turned to leave, anger propelling her toward the door. Wait. Elena stopped but didn't turn around. If I agree to this, Ronan said slowly, I want my own conditions. Now she turned. Such as? We maintain separate quarters. You run the household however you see fit, but you don't interfere with my work or my privacy. And when the year's up and we annul this farce, you don't ask me to change my mind. Done. Anything else? He hesitated, and for just a moment the cold mask slipped. Don't expect me to be easy to live with. I'm not the man I was before the war. I don't sleep well, I don't like crowds, and I'm not interested in playing the happy couple for society's entertainment. I'm not asking you to be anything except tolerable. Can you manage that? Can you? I survived 6 months in Pembroke's household pretending to be harmless while I stole evidence of his crimes. I think I can survive a year with an antisocial duke. Almost, he smiled. It was gone before she could be sure it happened, but something in his expression eased fractionally. The priest arrives in 30 minutes, he said. If we're doing this, we should probably both be presentable. Is that a yes? It's an acknowledgement of reality. There's a difference. He moved toward the door, pausing beside her. Up close, he was even taller than she'd thought, and the scar, she could see now it hadn't healed cleanly, probably should have been stitched by someone who knew what they were doing. For what it's worth, Miss Whitford, you're braver than most people, Catherine throws at me. Low bar. Accurate assessment. He opened the door. Mrs. Bramble will show you to your rooms. I'll meet you in the chapel. Then he was gone, limping down the corridor with the careful gait of someone who'd learned to work around pain. Elena stood alone in the library, the fire crackling behind her, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd negotiated with the Duke, argued with him, and somehow, impossibly, reached an understanding. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't even alliance, really, but it was something other than complete hostility, and right now she'd take it. Mrs. Bramble appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. Miss Whitford, if you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters. We've prepared the Duchess's suite. The Duchess's suite, because in less than an hour, that's what Elena would be. Duchess of Greymore, wife to a man she'd met 15 minutes ago, playing a role she'd learned in 2 days. Lead the way, Elena said, and followed the housekeeper into the maze of Greymore's corridors. The Duchess's suite was in the west wing, 3 rooms that apparently hadn't been occupied in years. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, the air stale from disuse. But someone, probably Mrs. Bramble working at speed, had stripped the covers from a bed large enough to sleep 4 people and opened windows to air the place out. The Duke's rooms are in the east wing, Mrs. Bramble said, her tone suggesting this was significant. Opposite side of the house. He mentioned separate quarters. Yes, miss. Lord Hale has been particular about his privacy since returning from the war. She gestured to a door on the far wall. That connects to a dressing room and bath. I've had your things brought up. There's a dress for the ceremony, though I'm afraid we didn't have much time to prepare anything elaborate. I'm sure it's fine. Mrs. Bramble studied her, and something in the older woman's expression softened fractionally. For what it's worth, miss, you handled that better than most would. His lordship isn't easy, but he's not cruel, just damaged. Feels some... Everyone keeps saying that, because it's true. War breaks men in different ways. Some come back loud and violent. Lord Hale came back quiet and distant. He's not the boy I remember. She moved toward the door. The ceremony is in 40 minutes. I'll send someone to help you dress. After she left, Elena walked to the window. Her rooms overlooked the northern grounds, forests stretching to the horizon, mountains visible in the distance. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, like everything else about Greymore. A knock at the door announced a young maid, nervous and efficient, who helped Elena out of her traveling clothes and into the wedding dress. It was simpler than the one Heloise had made, ivory silk without excessive embellishment, designed to be elegant rather than showy. Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like someone who belonged in a place like this, like she'd been born to wear silken titles. The maid pinned her hair up, added a simple veil, and stepped back. You look lovely, my lady. I'm not my lady yet. You will be in half an hour. Might as well get used to it. There was wisdom in that, Elena supposed. When she was ready, Mrs. Bramble reappeared to escort her to the chapel. They walked through Greymoor's corridors in silence, passing more portraits of dead Hales, more weapons on walls, more reminders that this family had built its legacy on survival and strength. The chapel was small, tucked into the southern corner of the estate. Old stone, narrow windows, simple wooden pews. Catherine was already there, along with the priest, an elderly man who looked like he'd presided over 1,000 weddings and found them all equally tedious. 2 servants stood as witnesses, their faces carefully blank. And at the altar, waiting with the posture of a man facing execution, stood Ronan. He'd changed into formal clothing, dark coat, crisp shirt, boots polished to military precision. The scar on his face stood out sharply against his pale skin. He looked exactly like what he was, a soldier forced to play nobleman, going through the motions of a ritual he didn't believe in. Elena walked down the short aisle, her heart hammering. This was insane. This was actually happening. Catherine caught her eye as she passed, giving a small nod of approval. The priest cleared his throat. "We are gathered here." The ceremony blurred. Elena heard herself saying words, making promises she didn't mean to a man who didn't want them. Ronan's voice was flat, mechanical. Getting through required responses with minimal emotion. When the priest told him to place the ring, a different one, older, the Greymoor wedding band, on her finger, his hands were steady. Hers were shaking. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may—" "That won't be necessary," Ronan said before the priest could finish. Catherine's smile was triumphant. "Sign the registry, both of you. Make it legal." They signed. Elena's handwriting was barely legible. Ronan's was precise, controlled, the signature of someone who'd signed orders sending men to die, and learned not to let his hand shake. "Congratulations," Catherine said. "You're now the Duke and Duchess of Greymoor. Try not to kill each other." "How long are you staying?" Ronan asked, his tone making it clear he wanted the answer to be 0 minutes. "I leave in the morning. This is your marriage, your problem. Make it work." She looked between them, something almost like satisfaction in her expression. "Though I will be visiting in 6 months to check on your progress toward producing an heir. Don't disappoint me." Elena's face burned. Ronan's jaw clenched. "We'll see you out," he said coldly. They walked Catherine to her carriage in silence. She climbed in, settled herself, and looked down at them both with the expression of someone who'd just executed a particularly satisfying gambit. "1 year," she said to Elena. "Make it count." The carriage rolled away into the gathering darkness. Elena and Ronan stood in the courtyard, married, alone, with no idea what to do next. "I need a drink," Ronan said finally. "That might be the first thing we've agreed on." He glanced at her sideways, and she could have sworn she saw the ghost of dark humor in his expression. "Come on. If we're going to survive this, we might as well start as we mean to continue, drunk and cynical." They walked back into Greymoor together, the massive doors closing behind them with a sound like a vault ceiling shut. Somewhere in the distance, Elena heard thunder rumbling. A storm was coming. She touched the wedding band on her finger, old gold, worn smooth by generations of Halewives, and wondered if any of them had felt as lost as she did right now. Ronan led her to a sitting room she hadn't seen before, smaller and more lived in than the formal spaces. He poured 2 glasses of something amber and handed her one without asking if she wanted it. "To survival," he said, raising his glass. Elena lifted hers in response. "To tolerating each other for a year yet." They drank. The liquor burned going down, sharp and honest. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against windows like fingers asking to be let in. "So," Ronan said, settling into a chair with the careful movements of someone whose body didn't work quite right anymore. "Duchess of Greymoor, how does it feel?" "Surreal, terrifying, like I'm playing a part in a play I never auditioned for." "Welcome to nobility. That feeling never goes away. You just get better at faking it." He stared into his glass. "I meant what I said. About separate quarters, privacy, not expecting. I know. I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give." "Good, because I don't have much left to give anyone." The rain was coming down harder now, a proper storm building. Elena moved to the window, watching water stream down glass, distorting the view of the grounds beyond. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "You can ask. I might not answer." "What happened to you? In the war, I mean. Everyone talks around it, but no one says what actually—" "No." The word was final, absolute. Elena turned to look at him. His face was closed, the mask firmly back in place. That's not part of our arrangement, he continued. You don't ask about that, and I don't ask about whatever hell you survived with Pembroke. We each keep our own damage private. Agreed? It wasn't what she wanted, but she recognized the shape of his refusal. It was the same wall she'd built around her own worst memories. Agreed, she said. They finished their drinks in silence, two strangers bound by law and necessity, sheltering from their respective storms in a fortress built to withstand sieges. Eventually, Ronan stood. It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow, Mrs. Bramble will go over household management with you. Greymore runs on routine, best if you learn it quickly. And you? I have work to finish, maps to review, correspondence to answer. The duchy doesn't manage itself. He moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. Elena. It was the first time he'd used her given name. She looked up. Thank you, he said, for not making this harder than it had to be. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the sitting room with the storm and her thoughts. Elena poured herself another drink, just one more to take the edge off, and returned to the window. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the grounds in stark white light. For just a moment, she could see everything clearly, the forests, the walls, the sheer isolation of Greymore. This was her life now. Duchess to a broken duke, mistress of a fortress, playing a role she barely understood. But she was alive. She was safe from Pembroke, and she'd just survived the most surreal day of her existence without completely falling apart. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the windows. Elena raised her glass to her reflection. To the Duchess of Greymore, she whispered. May she be stronger than Elena Whitford ever had to be. The reflection stared back, wearing a dead woman's wedding dress and a stranger's name, and Elena couldn't tell if she looked more like a survivor or a ghost. The reflection stared back, wearing a dead woman's wedding dress and a stranger's name, and Elena couldn't tell if she looked more like a survivor or a ghost. She set the glass down harder than intended, the sharp crack of crystal against wood startling her. Enough. She'd spent too much of her life staring at reflections, questioning whether she deserved to still be breathing. She was the Duchess of Greymore now. Time to act like it. The first week passed in a blur of routine and careful distance. Ronan kept to his wing of the house, appearing only for meals, which he ate quickly and in silence before retreating again. Elena spent her days with Mrs. Bramble, learning the mechanics of running an estate this size. The household staff, 23 people in total, treated her with polite wariness. She was their new duchess, but also an outsider, and they weren't sure yet which mattered more. By the 8th day, Elena had memorized the weekly accounts, understood the supply chains that kept Greymore running, and could navigate most of the manor without getting lost. She'd also reached the limits of educational tours and careful politeness. She found Ronan in the library, where else, bent over maps that looked military in origin, making notations in cramped handwriting. We need to talk, she said from the doorway. He didn't look up. About? The fact that we've been married over a week and you've spoken maybe 50 words to me total. If we're going to convince anyone this is real, we need to at least pretend to tolerate each other's company. No one's here to convince. Your aunt will visit eventually. So will others. And when they do, then we'll perform adequately for the required duration. He finally glanced up, his expression flat. I'm not interested in playing house, Elena. We have an arrangement. I'm holding up my end by not making your life miserable. That's all you get. Is it? She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Because from where I'm standing, hiding from your own wife and pretending she doesn't exist seems like a pretty efficient way to make her life miserable. You want me to what exactly? Have tea with you? Discuss the weather? Share my feelings? His voice dripped sarcasm. I'm not built for that anymore. I'm not asking you to share feelings. I'm asking you to act like I exist outside of mealtimes. Why? So you can feel less guilty about using me for protection? The words hit like a slap. Elena's hands clenched. That's unfair. Is it? You said it yourself. You're here because it's this or die. I'm just the convenient escape route. And you're here because Catherine forced you. We're both trapped. I thought we'd acknowledge that. Ronan returned to his maps. Acknowledging something and dwelling on it are different things. I prefer not to dwell. Elena studied him. The rigid set of his shoulders, the way he gripped the pencil too tightly, the careful control in every movement. This wasn't indifference. This was someone working very hard to maintain distance. "What are you so afraid of?" she asked quietly. His hand stilled. For a long moment he didn't respond. Then, "Get out." "No." Now he did look at her, and the anger in his expression was the first real emotion she'd seen from him since the wedding. "I said get out. And I said no. This is my house too now, and I'm tired of walking on eggshells around your trauma. You want privacy? Fine. You want separate quarters? Fine. But you don't get to treat me like an inconvenient ghost haunting your corridors. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Make me understand why you're so determined to push away the one person in this God-forsaken fortress who isn't here to judge you or fix you or because everyone I've let close to me ends up dead." The words exploded out of him, raw and furious. He shoved back from the desk, standing so fast his chair toppled. "Is that what you want to hear? That I'm not distant because I'm broken? I'm distant because proximity to me is fatal?" 3 years in the northern campaigns, and every single person I gave a damn about ended up in a mass grave or buried in pieces across a battlefield I couldn't even hold. So forgive me if I'm not eager to add my wife to that list. The silence after was deafening. Ronan was breathing hard, his face flushed, the scar standing out livid against his skin. Elena had frozen, the sheer violence of his confession stopping her cold. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I didn't—" "Of course you didn't. No one does." He raked a hand through his hair, looking anywhere but at her. "Just leave me alone, Elena. It's safer for both of us." She should leave. This was clearly what he wanted, what he needed. But she'd spent 6 months watching Pembroke destroy people from a distance, learning that silence and compliance only made predators bolder. "No," she said again, softer this time. "I won't." "What?" "I won't leave you alone. Not because I'm trying to fix you, or because I think I can somehow magic away your grief, but because I know what it's like to be so convinced you're poison that you push away everyone who might actually give a damn whether you live or die. And I'm telling you now, I'm not going anywhere." Ronan stared at her like she'd started speaking in tongues. "You're insane." "Probably. I did agree to marry a stranger to escape a murderer, so my judgment's clearly suspect." She moved closer, careful not to crowd him. "But here's the thing. You don't scare me. War trauma, survivor's guilt, whatever ghost you're carrying, I've got my own collection. We can compare notes if you want, or we can just exist in the same space without pretending the other person isn't there. Your choice. This is a mistake. Most things worth doing are." He laughed, sharp, bitter, but genuine. "You're definitely insane." "So you've mentioned." Elena bent to pick up his fallen chair, setting it upright. "Now, are you going to explain what these maps are, or do I have to guess? Because they look military, but we're not currently at war, so either you're planning an invasion or this is something else." Ronan hesitated, clearly torn between his instinct to shut her out and something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the desperate need to talk to someone who wasn't Mrs. Bramble about household accounts. "They're patrol routes," he said finally. "The northern border's been unstable since the war ended. Bandits, deserters, occasionally worse. I coordinate with local militias to keep the trade roads safe. You're still commanding troops. Not officially, but someone has to, and the Crown's too busy with politics to care about backwater provinces." He gestured at the maps, and despite himself, his tone shifted into something more engaged. "These routes cover the main merchant roads. We run weekly patrols, adjust based on reports from villages. It's not glamorous, but it keeps people alive." Elena studied the maps. They were detailed, professional, the work of someone who understood logistics and strategy. "This is what you do with your time. Protect people. Don't romanticize it. I'm just cleaning up the mess I helped create." Still sounds like protection to me. They stood there in silence, looking at maps marking out invisible lines between safety and danger. Outside, evening was falling, the library growing darker. "You should know," Ronan said quietly. Pembroke has connections in the north. Not direct holdings, but influence. If he's determined to find you, he'll eventually think to look here. Elena's blood went cold. How do you know that? Because I've been monitoring his activities since Catherine told me who you were. He's been making inquiries. Quietly, through intermediaries, but the pattern's there. He met her eyes. He's looking for you, and he's not giving up. Then what do we do? We make sure you're too visible to disappear. A missing tutor is easy to sweep under the rug. The Duchess of Greymore going missing? That's a scandal even Pembroke can't bury. He pulled out a different map, this one showing the capital and surrounding provinces. Catherine's planning a ball 4 weeks from now in Ashenmere. Every major family will attend. She wants us there to show off her successful matchmaking. To establish you publicly as my wife. Once you're recognized by society as a duchess, Pembroke can't touch you without touching my family, and the Hales have enough military connections that even he won't risk that fight. Elena's stomach churned. You want me to go back to Ashenmere, where his people are actively looking for me. I want you visible and protected. There's a difference. Ronan's jaw tightened. You'll have my name, my title, and my guards. Pembroke's influence doesn't extend into ballrooms full of witnesses. He operates in shadows. We deny him shadows. And if he tries something anyway, then I kill him. Said with the flat certainty of someone who'd killed before and would do it again without hesitation. But he won't. He's too smart to make himself that obvious a target. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. She'd known this peace couldn't last. Pembroke wasn't the type to let stolen documents and escaped witnesses go unavenged. When do we leave? She asked. 3 weeks. That gives us time to prepare. You'll need proper court clothing, jewelry, the full performance. Catherine's already arranging most of it, but we should discuss. He stopped, studying her expression. You're terrified. Of course I'm terrified. I stole from one of the most powerful men in Parliament, and now I'm supposed to waltz into his territory wearing a target on my back. You'll be wearing a title. It's better armor than you think. Armor didn't save that girl who drowned. Ronan's expression shuddered. No, it didn't. But she wasn't a duchess married to someone with a private army and a reputation for holding grudges. You are. That matters. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Mrs. Bramble brought it to Elena at breakfast, her face carefully neutral. The seal was unfamiliar. Not Catherine's, not anyone Elena recognized. She opened it, scanned the contents, and felt her world tilt. What is it? Ronan asked from across the table. He'd started joining her for breakfast at least, a small concession to her argument about basic civility. I don't understand. Elena read it again, but the words didn't change. It's from the magistrate's office in Ashenmere. They're summoning me to testify in a hearing about my father's death. Ronan went still. What kind of hearing? It says new evidence has emerged suggesting his death wasn't natural causes. They're reopening the investigation. Faces. Her hands were shaking. This is impossible. He died 6 years ago. What new evidence could possibly... Let me see that. She handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his expression darkening with each line. This is a trap, he said finally. What? Look at the signature. Deputy Magistrate Marcus Vey. The name hit like ice water. Vey, Pembroke's enforcer, the man who was chasing me. He's not a deputy magistrate. He's barely literate. Ronan stood, the letter crumpling in his grip. Pembroke's making a move. He can't find you, so he's trying to draw you out using your father. But the seal can be forged. The letterhead, too. This entire thing is designed to get you back to Ashenmere without the protection of a public event. He started pacing, his military mind clearly working through scenarios. If you respond, you'll be walking into whatever ambush he's arranged. If you ignore it, he'll claim you're obstructing justice, possibly issue a warrant. Either way, he damages your reputation and credibility. Elena's mind raced. Her father's death. She'd never gotten real answers about it, just vague explanations about heart failure and natural causes. If there was even a chance this was legitimate, if there was evidence that Pembroke had been involved, "I have to go," she said. "Absolutely not. If he killed my father, then walking into his trap won't bring your father back. It'll just give Pembroke exactly what he wants." Ronan slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "Use your head, Elena. This is bait. Obvious bait. I know it's bait, but what if it's also true? What if there is evidence, and ignoring this means it disappears forever?" She stood, matching his intensity. "I can't just let this go." "You can, and you will. We stick to the plan. The ball, public appearance, established protection. Not some fake summons designed to isolate you. You're not my keeper. I'm your husband. And I'm telling you, this is suicide. Since when do you care if I live or die? 2 hours ago, you were explaining how everyone close to you ends up dead anyway." The words hung in the air like poison. Ronan's face went white, then red, fury and something that looked like hurt warring in his expression. "Get out," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Ronan, I said get out." Elena fled, the letter clutched in her hand, her heart hammering. She made it back to her rooms before the tears came. Frustration, fear, anger at herself for throwing his confession back in his face like a weapon. She sank onto her bed, staring at the letter. It had to be fake. Ronan was right about that. But the possibility that it wasn't, that there was real evidence about her father's death. A knock at the door. "Miss, my lady?" Mrs. Bramble's voice. "Lord Hale requests your presence in his study. Immediately." Elena wiped her face, trying to compose herself. Elena wiped her. "Tell him I'll be there in a moment." When she entered the study 10 minutes later, Ronan was at his desk with 3 other men she didn't recognize. One was elderly, spectacled, carrying the leather satchel of a solicitor. The other 2 looked military, hard eyes, combat-ready bearing. "Gentlemen," Ronan said without preamble, "my wife has received what we believe is a forged summons from Ashenmere. I need you to verify its authenticity and, if it's genuine, determine whether the hearing is legitimate or a manufactured pretense." The solicitor took the letter, studied it with a jeweler's attention to detail. "The seal is wrong, too crisp. Official seals are worn, imperfect from repeated use. This was likely created specifically for this document." "And the signature?" Elena asked. "Marcus Vey is indeed listed in some records as holding a deputy position, but it's ceremonial, part of Pembroke's network of installed officials. He has no authority to issue summons." The solicitor looked up. "This is fraudulent. Cleverly done, but fraudulent." Relief and disappointment crashed through Elena in equal measure. "So there's no investigation into my father's death?" "Not through official channels." "I'm sorry, my lady." After the men left, Elena and Ronan stood alone in the study. The afternoon light was failing, shadows growing long. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "What I said before? About you not caring, that was cruel." It was honest. Ronan moved to the window, his back to her. "And not entirely wrong. I've spent 4 years not caring whether I lived or died. Easier that way. And now?" He didn't answer for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Now I have someone depending on me for protection. Someone who's reckless enough to consider walking into obvious traps. So apparently I have to care, at least enough to keep you alive. That's not... I meant what I said about Pembroke, did I?" He turned to face her. "If he comes after you, in any way, through any channel, I will destroy him. Not for justice, not for honor. Because you're mine to protect now, and I don't let people take what's mine." The possessiveness in his tone should have been frightening. Instead, it felt like the first genuinely solid thing in Elena's world since this entire nightmare began. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the ball." He returned to his desk, pulled out fresh paper. "We need to prepare. If Pembroke's desperate enough to forge official documents, he'll try something at the ball too. We need to be ready." "Ready how?" "By making sure everyone in that ballroom knows exactly who you are and why you matter. By making you too visible, too connected, too important to disappear." He started writing, his hand moving with decisive speed. "And by making sure Pembroke understands that touching you means war with a family that's very, very good at war." Elena watched him work. This man who claimed to care about nothing but was mapping out her protection with the focus of a general planning a campaign. Whatever was growing between them, alliance, friendship, something more complicated, it was real. Fragile, built on necessity and mutual damage, but real. "Ronan?" she said softly. "Hmm?" "I'm glad Catherine forced you to marry me." His hand paused. He looked up, genuine surprise in his expression. "Why?" "Because I think we might actually survive each other." For the first time since she'd met him, Ronan smiled. Really smiled, the expression transforming his face from harsh to something almost warm. "We might at that," he said, "though I reserve the right to be insufferable about it." Noted. The moment broke when Mrs. Bramble appeared with another letter, this one bearing Catherine's seal. "It's from your aunt," Elena said, opening it. She scanned the contents, her stomach sinking. "She's moved the ball up, 2 weeks instead of 4. "Why?" "She says circumstances require immediate action, and we're expected in Ashenmere in 10 days. Elena looked up. She knows about the summons. Or she's heard Pembroke's making moves. Either way, she's accelerating the timeline. Ronan's jaw clenched. Of course she is. Can't let a crisis go to waste when she can use it to orchestrate drama. What do? We do what we always do. We survive. He stood, rolling up the maps on his desk. 10 days. That's enough time to prepare, barely. I'll send word to my contacts in the city, make sure we have reliable security. You'll work with Mrs. Bramble on court protocol. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. And Elena? Yes? At the ball, you stay within my sight at all times. No wandering off, no private conversations with strangers. No trusting anyone who approaches you claiming to be a friend. Pembroke will have people there, and they'll be looking for opportunities. We don't give them any. You sound paranoid. I sound experienced. There's a difference. He moved toward the door, then paused. Your father would be proud of you, you know, for fighting back against Pembroke, for not just accepting the girl's death as the cost of surviving. The unexpected kindness of it made Elena's throat tight. How can you know that? Because he raised you to care about justice more than safety. That takes a particular kind of courage. Ronan's expression was unreadable. Don't waste it by getting yourself killed at a ball. That would be embarrassing for both of us. He left before she could respond, leaving Elena alone with Catherine's letter and the growing certainty that the next 2 weeks would determine whether she lived as the Duchess of Greymore or died as Elena Whitford. The following days blurred into frantic preparation. Dresses arrived from Ashenmere, Catherine's doing. Elaborate gowns designed to make Elena look like she'd been born to wear titles. Mrs. Bramble drilled her on court etiquette until Elena could navigate the complex rules of precedence and address in her sleep. Ronan spent hours with his military contacts, arranging discreet security and gathering intelligence on Pembroke's known associates. 6 days before the ball, a rider arrived with news that made Ronan go dangerously still. What is it? Elena asked. They were in the library, their unofficial neutral ground, reviewing the guest list for the ball. One of Pembroke's holdings burned last night. A warehouse on the river, completely destroyed. He set down the dispatch, his expression unreadable. The same warehouse mentioned in your stolen documents as the hub for his smuggling operation. Elena's blood went cold. Someone's targeting him? Or sending him a message? Ronan looked at her. Did you make copies of those documents? Give them to anyone before running? No, I only had the originals and She stopped. I left them in my room, at the Ashford estate, the night we traveled here. I was so focused on the wedding, I forgot about them entirely. Meaning Catherine has them. They stared at each other as the implications settled. She's weaponizing your evidence, Ronan said slowly. Using it to pressure Pembroke, probably, making him understand that his crimes are no longer secret. But why? What does she gain from antagonizing him? Leverage. Catherine doesn't do anything without calculating the angles. If Pembroke knows she has proof of his corruption, he's vulnerable. She can use that vulnerability to protect you, advance her own interests, possibly both. Ronan's expression darkened, but it also means she's provoked him. made this personal. So when we go to that ball, we'll be walking into a situation that's exponentially more dangerous than it was a week ago. Pembroke won't just be trying to eliminate a witness. He'll be trying to strike back at Catherine through you. Elena felt the walls closing in. Every step towards safety seemed to create new threats, new angles of attack. Maybe we shouldn't go. We have to. If we don't show, it looks like weakness, like we're afraid. That emboldens Pembroke and makes you a permanent target. Ronan stood, started pacing. No, we go. But we go prepared for war dressed as a party. How do we prepare for that? He turned to her, and the expression on his face was the same one he probably wore before battles. Cold, focused, absolutely certain. We make sure everyone in that ballroom understands that hurting you means consequences they can't survive. We turn you from a target into a deterrent. And how exactly do we do that? By making them fall in love with you. Elena laughed, sharp, disbelieving. I'm sorry, what? Not literally, but we make you sympathetic, admirable, someone they'd defend. Pembroke's power relies on operating in moral gray areas where people look the other way. We take away the gray. We make you someone whose harm would be so obviously unjust that even his allies would hesitate to help him. Ronan's mind was clearly racing through scenarios. Your father was well-liked, respected. We emphasize that connection. You're the daughter of a war hero diplomat, forced to flee a predator, now bravely rebuilding your life. That's a story people will rally behind. You want to turn me into propaganda? I want to turn you into someone they can't kill without making themselves villains. There's a difference. It was ruthlessly practical and more than a little manipulative. It was also possibly the only thing that might work. All right, Elena said. Teach me how to be lovable. His lips twitched. I'm probably the worst person to teach that particular skill. Then we'll figure it out together, Dick. The night before they were set to leave for Ashenmere, Elena couldn't sleep. She'd tried, lying in the massive bed in her suite, listening to the manure settle around her. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Pembroke's face, Vay's smile, the girl floating in the river. Finally, she gave up and wrapped herself in a dressing gown, padding barefoot through Greymoor's corridors. She ended up in the library, drawn by the faint glow of firelight under the door. Ronan was there, still dressed, staring into the flames. He didn't look surprised when she entered. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Haven't slept well in 4 years. Tonight's not special. He gestured at the chair opposite his. Sit. Might as well both be awake together. She settled into the chair, drawing her feet up under her. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across the bookshelves. Tell me about him, Ronan said quietly. Your father. What was he like when he wasn't negotiating ceasefires? Elena smiled despite herself. Terrible at chess. He'd spend hours planning elaborate strategies and then make impulsive moves that ruined everything. Drove my mother insane. He sounds human. He was. Very human. He believed people were fundamentally good, that diplomacy could solve almost anything if you just understood what everyone needed. She stared into the fire. Pembroke proved him wrong. Whatever happened at the end, whatever Pembroke did to ensure he died quietly, my father never saw it coming because he couldn't imagine someone being that ruthlessly evil. And you've spent 6 years proving you're not that naive. I've spent 6 years surviving. There's a difference. They sat in silence, two damaged people bound by necessity and something that might eventually become trust. Tomorrow, Ronan said finally, when we walk into that ballroom, we're going to be performing, playing roles. But I need you to know the protection I'm offering isn't performance. If Pembroke tries anything, I will end him. That's not bravado. It's fact. I believe you. Good. He stood, offered her his hand. Come on. If we're both going to be useless from exhaustion tomorrow, we might as well try to get a few hours of sleep. Elena took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. His grip was warm, calloused, steady. Ronan, she said as they reached the doorway. Thank you for not making me face this alone. He looked down at her, something unreadable in his expression. You saved me from a lifetime of Catherine's matchmaking schemes. Consider us even. It was said lightly, but Elena heard the truth underneath. They were in this together now, whatever this became. They parted in the hallway, him toward the east wing, her toward the west. Elena was halfway to her rooms when she heard the scream. It came from below, from the direction of the servants' quarters. High, terrified, abruptly cut off. Elena ran, her bare feet slapping against cold stone. Behind her she heard Ronan's footsteps. He'd heard it too. They converged on the servants' stairwell together, taking the steps two at a time. The screaming had stopped. That was somehow worse than if it had continued. They burst into the lower corridor to find Mrs. Bramble standing in an open doorway, her face sheet white, one hand pressed to her mouth. "What happened?" Ronan demanded. Mrs. Bramble couldn't speak. She just pointed into the room. Elena looked. One of the young maids, Sarah, she thought, barely 17, was collapsed on the floor, unconscious or worse, and on the wall above her bed, written in what looked like blood, were 3 words. "Come home, Elena." The room spun. Elena felt Ronan's hand on her arm, the only thing keeping her upright. "Get the doctor," Ronan snapped at Mrs. Bramble. "Now. And wake the house guards. No one enters or leaves this estate until I've questioned every single person. Move." Mrs. Bramble ran. Ronan pulled Elena back from the doorway, his face carved from stone. "He found you," Elena whispered. "Pembroke found me." "Someone found you, or someone let them in." He was scanning the corridor, already thinking tactically. This message was left tonight, which means either the perpetrator is still on the grounds, or they had help from inside. The girl, is she? Breathing. I can see her breathing from here. His jaw clenched. But this was a warning. Pembroke's telling you he can reach you anywhere, even here. See, the doctor arrived, rushing past them into the room. Guards appeared, weapons drawn. The manor that had felt like a fortress suddenly felt porous, vulnerable. Elena stared at those 3 words, written in a terrified girl's blood, and felt the last of her illusions about safety crumble into ash. Pembroke hadn't forgotten. He'd never stopped hunting. And now he'd proven that walls and titles and marriage contracts meant nothing if he wanted her badly enough. "We're still going to the ball," Ronan said, reading her thoughts. "We're going, and we're going to destroy him. Because this," he gestured at the message, his voice shaking with controlled fury, "this is a declaration of war, and wars are something I actually know how to win." Elena met his eyes and saw her own rage reflected back. "Then let's give him a war he'll regret starting." Then let's give him a war he'll regret starting. The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a threat. Elena felt something shift inside her. The scared girl fleeing through rain was gone. What remained was harder, colder, ready to fight back with everything she had. Ronan's eyes held hers for a moment. Then he turned to the guards now filling the corridor. "I want this estate locked down. Every entry point secured, every person accounted for. And someone find out how the hell an intruder got past our walls without triggering a single alarm." The head guard, a grizzled man named Thomas, stepped forward. "My lord, we did full perimeter checks at sunset. Nothing unusual. Then you missed something, or someone helped them." Ronan's voice was steel. "Either way, I want answers by dawn." The doctor emerged from Sarah's room, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She'll live. Whatever they used to knock her out was crude but not lethal, probably chloroform or something similar. She should wake within a few hours." "And the blood on the wall?" Elena asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not hers. Animal, I'd guess from the smell. Theatrical rather than actually violent." The doctor's expression was grim. "Whoever did this wanted to frighten, not kill." "They succeeded," Elena muttered. Mrs. Bramble appeared with blankets, immediately taking charge of the unconscious girl's care. The household was waking now, servants emerging from rooms, voices rising in confused alarm. Ronan began issuing orders with the efficiency of someone who'd commanded in actual combat, organizing search parties and security protocols. Elena stood in the corridor staring at those 3 words, and felt rage crystallize into something sharp and useful. Pembroke wanted her afraid, wanted her running again. Instead, she was going to walk straight into that ballroom and dare him to try something in front of half the aristocracy. Elena, Ronan's hand on her shoulder, his voice quieter now that the immediate crisis was being managed. You should rest. We leave in 6 hours. I'm not sleeping after this. Neither am I. But you can at least sit down before you fall down. He guided her toward the library, away from the chaos. Once inside, he poured 2 glasses of brandy, handing her one. Drink. You're shaking. She was. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her cold and unsteady. She drank, the liquor burning warmth back into her veins. He's escalating, she said. First the fake summons, now this. He's getting desperate. Good. Desperate men make mistakes. Ronan stood by the fire, his profile sharp in the flickering light. Catherine burning his warehouse forced his hand. He's reacting instead of planning, which means he's vulnerable. Vulnerable enough to make a move at the ball? Almost certainly, but now we know he will, which gives us advantage. He turned to face her. When we arrive in Ashenmere tomorrow, I'm sending you straight to Catherine's estate with half my guards. You stay there, under her protection, until the ball. I'll handle the preliminary meetings and intelligence gathering. No. His eyebrow rose. No? We do this together, or not at all. You said it yourself. I need to be visible, present, real to these people. Hiding at Catherine's defeats the whole purpose. The purpose is keeping you alive. The purpose is making me untouchable. There's a difference. Elena set down her glass with a decisive click. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm the Duchess of Greymore, and I'm going to act like it even if it terrifies me. Ronan studied her, something that might have been approval flickering across his face. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. I married you, didn't I? He almost smiled. Fair point. He moved to his desk, pulled out papers covered in his precise handwriting. All right, if we're doing this your way, we need a strategy that accounts for multiple threat vectors. Pembroke won't try anything in the main ballroom, too many witnesses, but there will be moments of vulnerability, arriving, departing, private conversations, and side rooms. So we eliminate those moments. Can't eliminate them all, but we can control them. He started sketching out what looked like a battle plan. You stay in public spaces at all times. If someone requests a private word, you decline politely or insist I accompany you. No wandering into gardens, no accepting drinks from strangers, no trusting anyone who claims to have information about your father. That last one's specific. Because it's exactly what I'd use as bait if I were Pembroke. He knows your weakness. Ronan's hand stilled on the paper. He'll exploit it if you give him the chance. Elena moved to stand beside him, looking at his notes. They were meticulous, covering arrival protocols, security positioning, even planned conversational topics to steer interactions towards safe subjects. He'd been preparing for this all along, she realized. Even before the attack tonight, he'd been planning how to protect her. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Really doing it, I mean. Not just because Catherine forced you or because of some honor code. Why do you care if Pembroke destroys me? Ronan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because you remind me of every person I failed to save in that war. Every civilian caught in crossfire. Every soldier who trusted me to bring them home and didn't make it. I couldn't protect them. He met her eyes. But I can protect you. And maybe that's selfish. Maybe I'm trying to redeem something that can't be redeemed. But I'm not letting another person die on my watch. Especially not my wife. The raw honesty of it stole her breath. She'd expected duty, maybe reluctant honor. Not this guilt-driven determination to keep her alive because everyone else had died. I'm not your penance, she said softly. No, you're my responsibility. There's a difference. He returned to his notes, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow's going to be brutal, and you'll need your strength. She should argue, should insist on staying up, helping plan, but exhaustion was catching up with her, dragging at her limbs. Promise me something. What? If Pembroke comes after me at that ball, if it comes down to him or us, promise me you won't hesitate. Don't let your guilt about who you couldn't save make you hesitate about stopping him. Ronan's expression went hard as stone. I won't hesitate. That's a promise I can keep. Tits. Dawn came too quickly and found Elena dressed in traveling clothes that cost more than her old apartment, standing in Greymoor's courtyard beside a carriage that looked like it was built to withstand siege warfare. Ronan was directing the guards, 8 men, all armed, all looking like they'd seen actual combat, while Mrs. Bramble fussed over luggage. Sarah had woken an hour ago, terrified and confused but physically unharmed. She couldn't remember who'd attacked her, only a cloth over her face and then darkness. The blood on the wall was confirmed to be pig's blood, purchased from a butcher in the nearby village. The investigation had yielded one useful detail. A stable boy reported seeing someone matching Vay's description at the village tavern 3 days ago, asking questions about the estate's security. He was scouting us, Ronan had said grimly, planning this for days. Now, as Elena climbed into the carriage, she saw the evidence of those plans in every security measure Ronan had implemented. Guards on horseback flanking the carriage, a second vehicle following with additional men, routes chosen for visibility rather than speed. They weren't just traveling to Ashenmere, they were making a statement. Ronan settled into the seat across from her, his expression unreadable. Still sure about this? Absolutely terrified, but yes, still sure. Good answer. He rapped on the roof, and the carriage lurched into motion. The journey took most of the day. They stopped twice to change horses, both times at way stations where Ronan's men had already swept the premises for threats. Elena watched the countryside roll past, each mile bringing them closer to Ashenmere and whatever Pembroke had planned. Tell me about the people we'll meet, she said, breaking the silence. Who are Pembroke's allies? Who might actually help us? Ronan pulled out a small leather notebook, flipping it open. Pembroke's core supporters are primarily military contractors and trade barons, people who benefit from his corruption. Lord Ashton, Chancellor Reeves, Magistrate Harding. They won't openly defend him, but they won't help us either. And potential allies. Your father's old colleagues. There are still diplomats who remember Michael Whitford's work. Senator Blackwood, Ambassador Chen, possibly even the Lord Chancellor himself if we approach him correctly. Ronan's finger traced down the list. Then there's the wild cards, people whose loyalty depends on which way the wind's blowing. Those are the ones we need to win. How? Oh, by being more compelling than Pembroke, more sympathetic, more useful. He looked up from his notes. Catherine's already been working on this. She's been quietly circulating your story. Diplomat's orphaned daughter, forced to flee a predator, now bravely rebuilding her life. It's positioned you as a victim and a survivor, which is politically valuable. Elena's stomach twisted. I hate being turned into a story. Better a story people sympathize with than a name in an obituary. His tone softened fractionally. I know it's manipulative. Welcome to aristocratic society. Everything's performance. They reached Ashenmere as the sun was setting, the city's lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. The carriage rolled through streets Elena had fled weeks ago, past buildings she recognized from her desperate escape. It felt surreal to be returning like this, not as a hunted tutor, but as a duchess in a fortress on wheels. Catherine's estate appeared ahead, blazing with light. The gates swung open without hesitation, and they rolled into a courtyard already packed with carriages. Apparently Catherine was hosting something tonight. She didn't mention a gathering, Ronan muttered as they climbed out. When does she mention anything? Elena smoothed her skirts, trying to look composed rather than terrified. Catherine herself emerged from the main house, resplendent in dark green silk, her expression triumphant. There you are. Perfect timing. I've assembled everyone who matters for a small reception in your honor. Small, Ronan said flatly, looking at the crowd visible through the windows. 70 guests, barely worth mentioning. Catherine turned to Elena, her critical gaze sweeping from head to toe. Better. You look almost like a duchess now. Come, both of you. Time to make your debut. Elena's heart hammered. Catherine, we weren't prepared for, which is precisely why I didn't warn you. Preparation breeds anxiety. You're better off spontaneous. She linked her arm through Elena's, steering her toward the entrance. Ronan, do try to look less like you're walking to your execution. You're a duke, not a prisoner. The reception was already in full swing, aristocrats in formal dress, champagne flowing, conversation humming. Elena recognized some faces from society pages, others from her father's old gatherings. All of them turned as Catherine announced their arrival. "Lords and ladies, may I present the Duke and Duchess of Greymore." Silence fell. Elena felt every eye in the room assess her, calculate her worth, judge whether she belonged among them. Ronan's hand found the small of her back, a subtle reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Then someone started clapping. Others joined, the applause building until it filled the room. Elena blinked, surprised. This wasn't the hostile reception she'd feared. Catherine leaned close. "They've been prepared. Your tragic story has been making the rounds for 2 weeks. You're the season's favorite underdog." Her smile was sharp. "Now smile and prove you deserve their sympathy." The next 2 hours were a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Elena met senators and ambassadors, merchants and military officers, all of them offering condolences about her father and congratulations on her marriage. Some were genuine, others performing, but all were watching to see how she handled herself. She found her rhythm eventually, channeling every lesson Catherine had drilled into her, gracious but not servile, composed but not cold. She let people see carefully curated vulnerability, mentioning her father's death with quiet grief, acknowledging her flight from danger without sensationalizing it. Ronan stayed close, a solid presence at her side, stepping in when conversations veered toward uncomfortable territory. "You're doing well," he murmured during a brief respite. "Better than well. They're charmed." "I'm exhausted. Another hour, then Catherine will make excuses and you can collapse in private." Across the room, Elena caught sight of a man watching her with unusual intensity. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the bearing of someone used to authority. Something about him tugged at memory. "Who's that?" she asked Ronan quietly. He followed her gaze, his expression tightening. "Lord Chancellor Marcus Thorne." Catherine must have pulled significant favors to get him here. "Should I approach him?" "He'll approach you if he wants to talk. Don't chase." But Thorne was already moving through the crowd toward them, other guests parting automatically to let him through. "Duke Hale," he said, offering his hand to Ronan. "Good to see you in society again. Your absence has been noted." Lord Chancellor. Ronan's handshake was firm but brief. "May I present my wife, Elena?" Thorne turned his attention to her, and Elena fought the urge to flinch under that assessing stare. "Duchess, I knew your father. Good man. His loss was felt deeply in diplomatic circles." "Thank you, my lord." "Keep it simple," she reminded herself. "Don't oversell." "Catherine tells me you've had some trouble lately. Something about Lord Pembroke?" His tone was casual, but Elena caught the sharp interest underneath. "A misunderstanding," she said carefully. "One that's been resolved through my marriage to the Duke." Pembroke's been making noise about stolen property. Documents, I believe." Thorne's gaze was steady. "Any idea what he's referring to?" This was a test. Elena could feel Ronan tense beside her, ready to intervene if needed, but she'd been preparing for this moment since she first stole those papers. "I'm sure I don't know, Aki," she said. "Though if Lord Pembroke has lost something important, perhaps he should be more careful about what he leaves lying around his household, employing trustworthy staff, for instance." Thorne's eyebrow rose fractionally. "Indeed. Wise advice." He glanced at Ronan. "Your wife is well-spoken, Duke. Diplomatic, even. She has her father's gift for careful phrasing." "She has her own gifts," Ronan replied. "I'm merely fortunate enough to benefit from them. We'll see." Thorne nodded to them both. "Enjoy the evening. I suspect we'll speak again soon." He moved away, leaving Elena breathing carefully through her nose. "That was a warning," Ronan finished. "He knows about the documents. Catherine's probably already shown him copies. He's telling us he's aware of the situation and making his own calculations about which side to support." "Did we pass his test?" "You didn't incriminate yourself or panic. That's passing enough." Ronan's hand found hers, squeezed briefly. "Come on. Catherine's giving us the exit signal. Time to retreat before you have to fence with anyone else." They made their excuses and escaped to a private sitting room Catherine had designated for their use. Elena collapsed into a chair the moment the door closed, pressing her hands to her face. "That was the most exhausting 3 hours of my life. You were perfect." Ronan poured her wine, pressed the glass into her hand. Every person in that room now sees you as a real person with a real story. When Pembroke tries to move against you, they'll remember this evening. Remember you as someone worth protecting, assuming he doesn't kill me before they get the chance. He won't. Ronan's voice was flat, certain. The ball is tomorrow night. Between now and then, you don't leave this estate. My men are positioned at every entrance. Catherine's staff has been vetted for loyalty, and I'll be checking security personally every 4 hours. Elena drank, feeling the wine start to unknot the tension in her shoulders. Do you really think we can win this? Destroy Pembroke without him destroying us first? Ronan was quiet for a moment, staring into his own glass. I think desperate men are dangerous, but cornered men are predictable. Pembroke's cornered now, his warehouse burned, his secrets exposed, his prey refusing to hide. He'll lash out tomorrow because it's his last good opportunity. And when he does, his smile was cold. We'll be ready. The ball began at 8. Elena spent the day preparing, being dressed, coiffed, jeweled until she barely recognized herself. The gown Catherine had commissioned was midnight blue silk that made her skin glow, cut to emphasize confidence rather than seduction. Sapphires at her throat and ears, the Greymoor wedding band gleaming on her finger. She looked like power dressed in elegance. Ronan appeared in formal court dress, the military medals on his chest a reminder that he'd earned his reputation in blood. The scar on his face somehow made him more impressive rather than less, a visible mark of survival. Ready? He asked. No, but we're doing this anyway. His lips quirked. That's the spirit. The carriage ride to the palace was tense and silent. Elena watched the city pass, remembering the last time she'd seen these streets, running, terrified, desperate. Now she was returning to the center of power, not as prey, but as a duchess. The irony wasn't lost on her. The grand palace blazed with light, carriages lined up to discharge their glittering cargo. Ronan helped her down, and Elena felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing this mysterious new duchess who'd appeared from nowhere. They entered through gilded doors into a ballroom that could have held a small army. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. An orchestra played on a raised platform. And everywhere, the cream of society in their finest, a sea of expensive fabric and calculated ambition. Catherine materialized beside them. The Lord Chancellor arrived 10 minutes ago. Pembroke's here somewhere. I saw him earlier looking murderous. Stay visible, stay together, and remember, tonight, you're not just surviving, you're winning. She swept away to greet other guests. Ronan offered Elena his arm. Once more into the breach, let's finish this. They descended the stairs into the ballroom together, and Elena felt the room's attention shift toward them. Conversations paused. People turned. And in that moment, Elena understood what Catherine had engineered. Everyone was watching to see what would happen when the Duchess of Greymoor and Lord Pembroke occupied the same space. Near the far end of the ballroom, Elena spotted him. Conrad Pembroke, perfectly groomed, champagne in hand, surrounded by supporters. He was staring directly at her, his expression promising violence. I see him, Ronan murmured. Stay calm. They moved into the crowd, accepting greetings and well wishes. Elena played her part perfectly, gracious, composed, every inch the Duchess. But she tracked Pembroke in her peripheral vision, watching him watch her. The confrontation came an hour into the ball. Elena was speaking with Ambassador Chen about her father's work when Pembroke simply appeared beside them, his smile not reaching his eyes. Duchess Greymoor, how unexpected to see you here. Chen's expression went carefully neutral. Elena forced herself to meet Pembroke's gaze without flinching. Lord Pembroke, the pleasure is all yours, I'm sure. His smile sharpened. Indeed. I've been hoping for a chance to speak with you about some missing property. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Documents taken from my household. I believe you were employed there when they disappeared. The nearby conversations were quieting, people sensing drama. Ronan appeared at Elena's side, his presence a wall of controlled threat. My lord, Ronan said, his tone polite and deadly, are you accusing my wife of theft? I'm merely noting a curious coincidence. Pembroke's eyes never left Elena. A thieving tutor vanishes, my private papers disappear, and weeks later a duchess appears bearing a remarkable resemblance to that same tutor. What would you make of such a coincidence? I'd make nothing of it, Ronan replied, because my wife's background has been thoroughly vetted and documented. She's Michael Whitford's daughter, a woman of impeccable breeding and character. If you're suggesting otherwise, I suggest you provide evidence or retract the implication. More people were watching now. This was exactly the public confrontation Catherine had predicted. Pembroke trying to destroy Elena's credibility in front of society. Evidence, Pembroke repeated softly. An interesting word. I wonder what evidence might surface about various people's activities if one looked carefully enough. Elena's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. Are you threatening me, my lord? Simply observing that secrets have a way of emerging, especially when powerful families involve themselves in matters that don't concern them. He glanced at Ronan. Your aunt, for instance, has been remarkably interested in my business affairs lately. Unfortunate accidents can happen when people meddle where they shouldn't. The threat was blatant now. Ronan went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Is that a threat against Lady Ashford? Ronan's voice was soft, dangerous. Before Pembroke could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Gentlemen, ladies. Lord Chancellor Thorne appeared, champagne in hand, his expression one of mild interest that didn't reach his calculating eyes. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just renewing old acquaintances, Pembroke said smoothly, but Elena saw frustration flash across his face. Thorne's presence had diffused his attack. How pleasant. Thorne turned to Elena. Duchess, I wonder if you might spare me a moment. I have some questions about your father's work in the northern provinces. Nothing urgent, but your perspective would be valuable. It was a rescue disguised as a request. Elena inclined her head. Of course, my lord. Duke Hale, you'll excuse me. Ronan's hand brushed hers briefly. A reminder, a reassurance. Don't wander far. But, Thorne guided her away from Pembroke toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. Once they were out of immediate earshot, his expression shifted to something more serious. That was foolish of him, Thorne said quietly, making threats in front of half the court. He's losing control. He's desperate, isn't she? Elena replied. Catherine's been pressuring him. I'm aware. She showed me the documents you acquired. Quite damning. Thorne studied her. Tell me something, Duchess. What do you want from all this? Revenge? Justice? Or just to survive? Elena considered lying, saying what she thought he wanted to hear. But Thorne struck her as someone who valued honesty more than performance. All three, she said. I want Pembroke to answer for the girl he killed and the crimes he's committed. I want justice for my father, whose death I still don't fully understand. And yes, I want to survive long enough to see it happen. Is that so much to ask? For most people? Yes, but you're not most people. Thorne's expression was unreadable. Your father once told me that true diplomacy wasn't about making everyone happy. It was about finding the truth both sides could live with. I think you inherited his gift for that. My lord, Lord Pembroke has been useful to certain interests for years, but usefulness has limits, and he's reaching his. Thorne set down his champagne with a decisive click. When the time comes, and it will come soon, I'll need someone to testify about what they saw in his household. Someone credible, with nothing to gain from lying. Would you be willing to do that? Elena's breath caught. You're investigating him? Let's say I'm prepared to investigate him, should sufficient cause arise. Your documents provide that cause. But documents can be forged. Eyewitness testimony from a duchess, however. He smiled slightly. That's considerably harder to dismiss. I'll testify, Elena said immediately. Whatever you need. It's good. Then we understand each other. Thorne glanced across the ballroom to where Pembroke stood glowering at them. He'll try something tonight. He's too angry, too cornered not to. Stay close to your husband, and when Pembroke makes his move, don't panic. We'll be watching. He walked away, leaving Elena alone with the realization that the most powerful man in the government had just allied himself with her. Whatever happened next, she wasn't facing it without support. She made her way back to Ronan, who'd been intercepted by a cluster of military veterans discussing border security. He saw her approach and immediately extracted himself. What did Thorn want? To offer his support. He's preparing an investigation into Pembroke, and he wants me to testify. Elena kept her voice low. He also warned that Pembroke will make a move tonight. I'd be shocked if he didn't. Ronan scanned the ballroom. He's disappeared, probably planning something. They didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, a footman approached with a silver tray bearing a sealed letter. For the Duchess of Greymore. The gentleman said it was urgent. Elena took it, immediately suspicious. The seal was unfamiliar. She broke it open, read the contents, and felt ice flood her veins. Duchess, if you wish to learn the truth about your father's death, come to the East Gallery alone. Bring no one, or the evidence disappears forever. You have 10 minutes. It's from Pembroke, she said, handing it to Ronan. Using my father as bait, just like you predicted. Ronan's jaw clenched as he read. You're not going. I know, but he's counting on me to go, which means which means he's set up something in that gallery. An ambush, probably. Maybe worse. Ronan looked around, spotted one of his guards near the entrance. He made a subtle gesture, and the man began moving toward them. Here's what we do. You stay here, in full view of everyone. I go to the East Gallery with my men. We spring whatever trap he's laid, and we drag him before Thorn with evidence of attempted assault or worse. That's risky. Less risky than you actually going. His expression softened fractionally. Trust me? Elena nodded. Go. But Ronan, don't get yourself killed proving a point. Wouldn't dream of it. I have a wife to protect. He moved away quickly, gathering his guards with subtle signals. Elena watched him go, then turned back to the ballroom, forcing herself to smile and nod at passing acquaintances while her heart hammered against her ribs. Minutes ticked by. 5, 7, 10. Elena accepted champagne from a passing servant to have something to do with her hands. Around her, the ball continued. Music, laughter, the eternal dance of power and influence. Then shouting erupted from somewhere beyond the ballroom. The music stuttered to a halt. Conversations died. Everyone turned toward the commotion. Ronan appeared in his doorway, his expression grim. Behind him, 2 of his guards were restraining someone. Not Pembroke, Marcus Vey, struggling against their grip, his expensive suit disheveled. Lord Chancellor, Ronan called across the ballroom. I believe you'll want to see this. Thorn materialized from the crowd, moving toward the entrance. The entire ballroom followed, unable to resist the spectacle. Elena pushed through the crowd, reaching Ronan's side. What happened? Exactly what we thought. Vey was waiting in the East Gallery with 2 hired thugs. They had chloroform, rope, and a back exit into an alley where Carriage was waiting. Ronan's voice was loud enough to carry to the gathering crowd. An apparent kidnapping attempt against the Duchess of Greymore. Gasps rippled through the assembled aristocracy. Thorn stepped forward, his expression thunderous. Is this true? He demanded of Vey. Vey's face was red, sweat beading on his forehead. I don't know what he's talking about. I was just waiting in a private gallery with hired muscle and abduction supplies. Ronan pulled something from his pocket, a length of rope. My men found this on one of your accomplices. Care to explain its purpose? The crowd was murmuring now, shock and outrage building. This was public, undeniable, exactly the kind of scandal that destroyed reputations. Where's Pembroke? Thorn asked sharply. As if summoned, Pembroke appeared at the edge of the crowd, his face a careful mask of confusion. What's going on here? Your man was caught attempting to kidnap the Duchess of Greymore, Thorn said, his voice cold. I assume you have some explanation? My man? Pembroke looked at Vey with theatrical surprise. I barely know the gentleman. If he's committed some crime, don't. The word cracked like a whip. Elena stepped forward, every eye in the ballroom turning to her. Don't you dare pretend you don't know him. Marcus Vey has been your enforcer for years. He chased me through Ashenmere when I fled your household with evidence of your corruption. And tonight he tried to finish what you started, making me disappear before I could testify against you. Testify? Pembroke's laugh was strained. About what? The fantasies of a troubled girl? About embezzlement? Bribery? Murder? Elena's voice rang clear across the ballroom. I worked in your household for 6 months. I saw your records, your correspondence, the trail of money you stole from military funds. And I saw what you did to a 16-year-old girl who rejected your advances. The girl they found drowned in the river. The girl whose death was ruled an accident because you own half the magistrates in this city. The silence was absolute. Elena could feel everyone staring, at her, at Pembroke, at this collision of accusation and power. These are serious allegations, Thorne said quietly. Do you have proof, Duchess? I have documents, financial records, letters, evidence that Lord Pembroke has been systematically defrauding the crown and eliminating anyone who threatened to expose him, including, I believe, my father. Elena met Pembroke's eyes, saw the rage and fear warring there. My father died 6 years ago under mysterious circumstances while investigating irregularities in military contracts. Contracts you controlled, my lord. That's not coincidence. You lying little... Pembroke started forward, but Ronan's hand shot out, gripping his shoulder hard enough to stop him cold. I wouldn't, Ronan said softly. Not in front of witnesses. Thorne raised his hand and palace guards appeared from the periphery. Lord Pembroke, Marcus Vey, you're both under arrest pending investigation into these charges. Duke Hale, I'll need those documents the Duchess mentioned. Catherine has copies, Ronan said. I'm sure she'll be delighted to provide them. Pembroke was pale now, the reality of his situation clearly sinking in. This is ridiculous. You can't arrest me based on the word of some girl. The word of a duchess, Thorne corrected, corroborated by physical evidence and witnessed attempted kidnapping. I think that's more than sufficient cause. He nodded to the guards. Take them both. We'll sort this out properly in the morning. As the guards moved to restrain Pembroke, he locked eyes with Elena one final time. The hatred there was pure and absolute. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, Elena said quietly. It is. They dragged him away, Vey cursing and struggling beside him. The ballroom erupted in shocked conversation, everyone talking at once. Catherine appeared beside Elena, her expression triumphant. Well done, though I would have preferred slightly more subtlety. Subtlety wouldn't have put him in custody, Ronan replied. He turned to Elena. Are you all right? She was shaking, adrenaline and relief warring in her system. I just publicly accused one of the most powerful lords in Parliament of murder and corruption in front of half the aristocracy. I'm either brilliant or dead. Brilliant, Catherine said firmly, and now very, very protected. Every person in this ballroom heard your testimony. Pembroke can't make you disappear without confirming your allegations. You've made yourself too important to silence. Thorne reappeared, having dispatched the prisoners. Duchess, I'll need a full statement tomorrow. Everything you witnessed, every document you can provide. This is going to trial, and I want Pembroke buried so deep he never sees daylight again. You'll have everything, Elena promised. Thank you, my lord, for believing me. Your father was a good man who died suspiciously while investigating corruption. His daughter appears years later with evidence supporting exactly what he was investigating. Thorne's smile was thin. I'm many things, Duchess, but I'm not blind to patterns. We'll get you justice, for you and for him. The rest of the ball passed in a blur. Elena and Ronan stayed another hour, long enough to show they weren't fleeing in fear, long enough to accept congratulations and support from dozens of people who suddenly wanted to be allied with the Duchess, who'd brought down Lord Pembroke. By the time they finally escaped to their carriage, Elena felt wrung out and oddly hollow. It's done, she said as they rolled away from the palace. It's actually done. It's begun, Ronan corrected. The trial will take months. Pembroke's lawyers will fight every step. There will be attempts to discredit you, possibly threats against you or Catherine. This is far from over. But he's in custody. He can't hurt anyone else. Not directly, no. Ronan studied her in the dim carriage light. You were extraordinary tonight, brave and precise and absolutely devastating. Your father would have been proud. Vos sientes. The compliment, unexpected and sincere, broke something loose in Elena's chest. She felt tears burning her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Don't, she managed. Don't be kind right now. I'll fall apart. Then fall apart. You've earned it. So she did. Collapsed against Ronan's shoulder and let herself cry for her father, for the dead girl, for the 6 months of fear and the weeks of pretending to be strong when she felt fragile as glass. He held her without speaking, steady and solid, until the tears ran dry and exhaustion took over. Thank you, she whispered, for protecting me, for believing I was worth protecting. You are worth protecting. His voice was rough. And I'm starting to think Catherine might have been onto something with this marriage after all. Elena looked up at him, saw something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Not quite affection, too soon for that, but respect, maybe. Partnership. The recognition that they'd fought this battle together and won. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home to Greymore. You give your testimony when Thorne summons you. The trial proceeds. Pembroke's empire crumbles. And we, he paused. We figure out how to be married for real instead of just in name. That's terrifying. Most things worth doing are. He smiled, genuinely smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face into something almost peaceful. But we've survived worse than each other. We'll manage it. The carriage rolled through Ashenmere's streets toward Catherine's estate, carrying them away from the battlefield and toward something new. Elena leaned against Ronan's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, and allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd found something more valuable than survival. They'd found each other. And in the wreckage of everything they'd both lost, that felt like the beginning of something worth fighting for. They'd found each other. And in the wreckage of everything they'd both lost, that felt like the beginning of something worth fighting for. The carriage wheels clattered over cobblestones as they turned into Catherine's estate, and Elena felt Ronan shift beside her, his body tensing in a way she'd learned meant he'd spotted something wrong. What is it? She asked, sitting up. The gates. They should have guards posted. His hand moved to the concealed blade he kept strapped to his boot. Thomas, he called to the driver, take us around back. Don't stop at the main entrance. But it was too late. The carriage lurched to a halt as men stepped into the drive, blocking their path. Not palace guards. Not Catherine's men. These were rougher, hired muscle, with the look of dockyard enforcers. Stay behind me, Ronan ordered, already moving. He kicked open the carriage door, blade in hand, placing himself between Elena and the threat. Easy, my lord. One of the men stepped forward, hands raised in mock surrender. We're just here to deliver a message from Lord Pembroke. He's in custody, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. For now. But powerful men have powerful friends. The thug smiled, revealing gaps where teeth should be. He wanted you to know tonight's performance at the ball was entertaining, but court cases take time. Months, maybe years. Lots can happen in that time. Accidents, fires, people disappearing on lonely roads. Is that a threat? Ronan's voice was ice. Just a reminder that walls don't stop determined men, neither do titles. The thug's gaze slid to Elena. Watch your back, Duchess. Prison cells have bars, but they don't seal mouths. Pembroke still has resources, still has reach. Tell your master, Elena said, stepping out from behind Ronan despite his warning hand, that if anything happens to me, there are sealed documents with 3 separate solicitors detailing everything I know. My death triggers their release to every newspaper in the capital. He touches me, he destroys himself. It was a bluff. She hadn't arranged any such thing. But the thug's expression flickered with uncertainty. Ronan caught the lie and ran with it. Additionally, he said, his blade catching the lamplight, tell Pembroke that any attempt on my wife's life will be met with a response that makes tonight's arrest look gentle. I've killed men for far less provocation, and I'm very good at making bodies disappear. He understands warfare. I hope he's smart enough to recognize when he's outmaneuvered. The thugs exchanged glances. Their leader spat on the ground. You've been warned, What you do with the warning is your business. They melted back into the shadows, leaving the drive empty except for Elena, Ronan, and the suddenly oppressive darkness. Inside, Ronan said quietly, "Now." Catherine was waiting in her study, a glass of wine in hand, her expression tight with controlled fury. "I heard about the welcoming committee. Pembroke's clearly not as contained as we'd hoped. He's coordinating from custody," Ronan said, pacing like a caged animal, "which means either his guards are corrupt or his reach extends further than we estimated. Both, probably." Catherine set down her wine with a sharp click. "I've already sent word to Thorne. He's doubling the prison security and investigating which guards might be compromised. But Ronan's right. Pembroke won't stop just because he's behind bars. He's going to fight this with everything he has." Elena sank into a chair, exhaustion and fear warring in her chest. "So what do? We can't fight him from the shadows forever." "We don't fight from the shadows. We finish this publicly and decisively." Catherine pulled out a leather folder, spreading documents across her desk. "The trial begins in 4 weeks. Thorne's fast-tracking it because of the attempted kidnapping and the threat to a titled noble. But 4 weeks gives Pembroke time to undermine witnesses, bribe officials, arrange accidents." "Then we don't give him 4 weeks," Elena said. "We strike first." Both Catherine and Ronan turned to look at her. "Explain," Catherine said. Elena's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. Pembroke's power comes from secrets. People who owe him favors, criminals he protects, officials he's compromised. But what if we exposed all of it? Not in a courtroom where his lawyers can object and delay, but publicly, undeniably. Make it impossible for anyone to defend him without implicating themselves. "You're talking about releasing the documents," Ronan said slowly. "All of them. Not just releasing, weaponizing them." Elena stood, moving to the desk. "We publish everything, names, amounts, crimes, every bribe, every payoff, every person in Pembroke's network. We turn his corruption into the scandal of the decade." Catherine's eyes gleamed. "It would destroy half the current parliament." "Good. Let them burn with him." Elena's voice was hard. "These are people who enabled a murderer who looked the other way while he killed a 16-year-old girl and covered up my father's death. They don't deserve protection. It's risky," Ronan warned. "You'd be making enemies of everyone Pembroke's ever worked with. That's not just him anymore. That's dozens of powerful people who'd want you silenced." "Ars! They already want me silenced. At least this way, I take them down with me." Elena met his eyes. "You said I was brave at the ball. Let's see how brave I actually am." Catherine smiled, sharp and predatory. "I like it. We'll need to move quickly, get the documents to friendly newspapers, prepare for the backlash, ensure we have legal protection when Pembroke's allies try to retaliate." "How long?" Ronan asked. "If we work through the night, we can have packages ready by dawn. Delivered to every major newspaper in the capital by noon tomorrow." Catherine was already making notes. "I'll contact my allies in Parliament, the ones who aren't compromised. We'll need political cover when this explodes." "And Elena's safety?" Ronan's tone made it clear this was non-negotiable. "She stays here under guard until the publications hit. After that, she'll be too visible to disappear. Pembroke's people would have to kill her in broad daylight, which even they aren't stupid enough to attempt." Catherine looked at Elena. "This is your choice, girl. Once we do this, there's no going back. Every powerful person Pembroke's ever touched will know you destroyed them. Are you prepared for that?" Elena thought of the girl in the river. Her father's suspicious death. 6 months of fear, watching a monster operate with impunity because no one was willing to challenge him. "I'm prepared." "But," she said, "let's burn it all down." They worked through the night. Catherine's solicitors arrived with the original documents Elena had stolen, now meticulously copied and organized. They sorted them by crime type, embezzlement here, bribery there, blackmail, and extortion in separate folders. Each package included Elena's signed testimony explaining what she'd witnessed and how she'd obtained the evidence. Ronan coordinated with his network of former military contacts, arranging secure delivery to ensure the packages reached their destinations. Elena wrote accompanying letters to editors, explaining Pembroke's crimes in clear, damning language that left no room for misinterpretation. By dawn, 23 packages were ready for delivery to newspapers, parliamentary offices, and key allies. Catherine sent them out with her most trusted couriers, each one taking a different route to ensure at least some reached their targets, even if Pembroke's people tried to intercept them. "Now we wait," Catherine said, pouring coffee that none of them really wanted, but all of them needed. The morning editions go to press in 3 hours. By noon, every literate person in Ashenmere will know what Pembroke did. Elena stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the capital. Somewhere out there, Pembroke was waking in his prison cell, unaware that his entire world was about to collapse. She felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion and grim determination to see this through. Ronan appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He passed her one without speaking, and they stood together watching the city wake. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "Dozens. But not about this." She glanced at him. "What about you? You're about to be married to the woman who brought down half the government. That's going to complicate your life considerably." My life was already complicated. You're just a different kind of chaos than I'm used to. His lips quirked. "Besides, I married you knowing you'd stolen classified documents and fled a murder scene. This is exactly the kind of thing I should have expected." "I didn't flee a murder scene. I fled before becoming one." Semantics. They fell into comfortable silence. Over the past weeks, something had shifted between them. The forced proximity and shared danger forging a connection neither of them had anticipated. Elena couldn't name it yet, wasn't sure she wanted to. But standing here with him, watching dawn break over a city about to explode with scandal, she felt safer than she had in years. "Whatever happens today," Ronan said, "you don't face it alone. You understand that?" "I'm starting to." "Good, because I meant what I said in the carriage. We're figuring out how to be actually married, and that means I'm not letting you get yourself killed before we have the chance." Elena smiled despite the tension. "How romantic. I'm a work in progress. Give me time." The first newspaper hit the streets at 9 o'clock. By 9:30, Catherine's network reported that people were gathering in public squares to read the revelations aloud. By 10, parliamentary session had been suspended as representatives scrambled to respond to the allegations naming them. By 11, riots had broken out near Pembroke's townhouse, angry citizens hurling stones and demanding justice. Elena watched it all unfold from Catherine's study, messengers bringing updates every few minutes. The scale of the reaction was stunning. She'd expected scandal, but this was revolution in miniature. People were furious, decades of corruption laid bare, and suddenly everyone wanted blood. 3 members of parliament have already resigned, Catherine reported, reading the latest dispatch. Magistrate Harding's been arrested for accepting bribes. Chancellor Reeves is claiming ignorance, but no one's buying it. And Pembroke, she smiled coldly. Pembroke's lawyer just withdrew from his case. Even professional advocates have limits, apparently. "What about threats against Elena?" Ronan asked, ever practical. "So far, nothing concrete. The public outcry is too loud. Anyone moving against her now would confirm everything she's revealed. They're scrambling to save themselves, not plan retaliation." Catherine poured more coffee. "Though I'd still recommend maintaining security for the foreseeable future. Desperate men are unpredictable." A knock at the door announced Lord Chancellor Thorne's arrival. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight, his expression exhausted and furious in equal measure. "Duchess," he said without preamble, "you've started a wildfire." "Good," Elena replied. "It needed burning. Half of Parliament is implicated in these documents. The courts are overwhelmed with arrest warrants. The city's on the edge of riots." He moved to the window, staring out at the chaos visible even from here. "This is the largest corruption scandal in a century. What's? And long overdue," Catherine added. "These people have been poisoning the government for decades. Elena just exposed the rot." Thorne turned back to her. "I'm not criticizing Lady Ashford. I'm impressed and frankly relieved. I've been trying to root out this corruption for years, but I lacked evidence and political capital. You've provided both in one devastating package." He looked at Elena. "The trial's been moved up, 2 weeks instead of 4. With public pressure this intense, we can't afford to delay justice." "Will it be enough to convict him?" Elena asked. "With his lawyer withdrawing and all this evidence public, will it actually stick?" It'll stick, Thorne said grimly. Pembroke's done. The only question now is how many others go down with him. He pulled out a document from his coat. I need your formal testimony. Everything you witnessed, dates, times, specific incidents. This goes on official record as the primary evidence against Pembroke and his associates, us. Elena spent the next 3 hours giving her statement. Every detail of her time in Pembroke's household, the documents she'd copied, the conversation she'd overheard. She told them about the girl who'd drowned, about her suspicions regarding her father's death, about the systematic corruption she'd documented. Thorne's clerks wrote it all down in careful legal language, transforming her memories into weapons. When it was finally done, Elena felt hollowed out and strangely lighter. She'd been carrying these secrets for 6 months, the weight of them crushing her. Now they belonged to the courts, to justice, to everyone who'd been harmed by Pembroke's cruelty. This is good, Thorne said, reviewing the pages. Detailed, credible, corroborated by physical evidence. With this testimony, Pembroke will spend the rest of his life in prison, possibly hanged depending on what we can prove about the murders. What about the others? Ronan asked. The people he worked with? Some will face trial, others will resign and fade into obscurity. A few might escape entirely. They're clever enough to have insulated themselves. Thorne's expression hardened. But their careers are finished. Their reputations destroyed. That's its own kind of justice. After Thorne left, Elena retreated to her rooms. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the night was fading, leaving her exhausted and emotionally raw. She collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. A soft knock at the door. Elena? Ronan's voice. Can I come in? Why, Batus. Yes. Mahan. He entered, carrying a tray with food she hadn't asked for but definitely needed. Mrs. Bramble's orders. She says you haven't eaten since yesterday. I haven't thought about food since yesterday. But Elena sat up, accepting the plate. Thank you. Ronan settled into a chair by the window, watching her eat. You did it. You actually brought him down. We did it. I couldn't have survived this without you and Catherine. Maybe. But the courage to fight back, that was all you. He was quiet for a moment. I meant what I said before, about figuring out how to be actually married. I know this started as a transaction, but it's not anymore, Elena finished. I know. I feel it too. I'm not good at this, at caring about people, letting them close. The war broke something in me that I'm not sure can be fixed. I'm not asking you to be fixed. I'm just asking you to be here. Elena set down her plate, meeting his eyes. We're both damaged, both carrying ghosts. But maybe that means we understand each other better than whole people ever could. Ronan stood, moved to sit beside her on the bed. I was so convinced that everyone I cared about ended up dead. That I was cursed, toxic, safer alone. And then you crashed into my life and refused to disappear, no matter how hard I tried to push you away. I'm stubborn like that. You're extraordinary like that. He took her hand, his grip warm and solid. I don't know what we're building here, but I know I want to keep building it. If you're willing. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, happy ones for the first time in longer than she could remember. I'm willing. More than willing. He leaned forward, and she met him halfway. Their kiss tentative at first and then deeper, full of promise and possibility. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. So, Ronan said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. What do we do now? The battle's won, Pembroke's defeated. What comes after? Well, we go home to Greymore. We learn how to actually be married instead of just legally bound. We figure out what our life looks like when we're not constantly fighting for survival. Elena leaned against his shoulder. And maybe, eventually, we become the partnership Catherine always intended us to be. That's terrifying. Most things worth doing are. He laughed, genuinely laughed, and the sound was so unexpected and warm that Elena felt something loosen in her chest. They were going to be all right, be damaged and imperfect and carrying more trauma than any two people should, but they were going to be all right. The trial began 2 weeks later in the Grand Court, and Elena had never seen anything like it. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, observers standing in hallways and spilling into the street outside. Every major newspaper had representatives present. Parliamentary members filled the gallery, and at the defendant's table sat Conrad Pembroke, looking smaller and older than Elena remembered, flanked by a hastily assembled legal team that looked deeply unhappy to be there. Elena took her place in the witness box, Ronan visible in the front row, his presence a steady anchor. Lord Chancellor Thorne himself was prosecuting, a clear signal of how seriously the Crown was taking this case. "Duchess Greymore," Thorne began, "please tell the court how you came to be employed in Lord Pembroke's household." Elena took a breath and began. She told them everything: her father's death, her need for work, the months she'd spent teaching Pembroke's nephew while observing the corruption around her. She described the girl who'd been murdered, the documents she'd copied, the night she'd fled through the rain. Pembroke's lawyers tried to discredit her testimony, suggesting she'd fabricated evidence out of spite or delusion. But every claim they made crumbled against the physical documentation. The financial records were verified by Crown auditors. The letters bore Pembroke's own seal. Former servants corroborated her account of the household's atmosphere. When Elena described finding the documents detailing her father's investigation into military contract fraud, Pembroke's mask finally cracked. He half rose from his seat, face flushed. "That man was a fool who couldn't see what was necessary for the country's defense," he shouted. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, slamming his gavel repeatedly. "My lord," Thorne said quietly, "I believe the defendant has just confirmed that he was aware of Michael Whitford's investigation that ceased upon Mr. Whitford's sudden and suspicious death." Pembroke's lawyer was frantically trying to quiet his client, but the damage was done. The outburst had revealed exactly what Elena had suspected. Her father had been murdered because he'd gotten too close to the truth. The trial lasted 6 days. Witness after witness testified to Pembroke's crimes. Financial experts detailed the embezzlement. Former servants described the hostile environment. Medical examiners presented findings that the drowned girl's injuries were inconsistent with accidental death. When the verdict came, it was swift and absolute. Guilty on all counts. Embezzlement, bribery, corruption of public officials, conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole. Additional charges were pending regarding Michael Whitford's death. The courtroom exploded in cheers. Elena sat very still, feeling the weight of 6 years finally lifting from her shoulders. Justice hadn't brought her father back. It hadn't saved the murdered girl. But it had stopped Pembroke from hurting anyone else. And that was something. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ronan's guards formed a protective barrier while Elena made a brief statement. "My father believed that justice was the foundation of civilization, that no one, regardless of power or position, should be above the law. Today's verdict proves he was right. I only wish he could have lived to see it." Her voice was steady, clear. "To anyone else suffering under corrupt power, speak up, find your allies, fight back. The system isn't perfect, but it can work if enough people demand justice." More questions were shouted, but Ronan guided her toward their carriage. They rode back to Catherine's estate in silence, the reality of their victory still settling. "How do you feel?" Ronan asked finally. "Strange. Empty in a good way, like I've been carrying a boulder and finally set it down." Elena looked at him. "And grateful. For you, for Catherine, for everyone who helped make this happen. You made it happen. We just provided support. Yo sé. Mets. It took all of us." She laced her fingers through his. "What now? Back to Greymore?" "Eventually, but first Catherine's throwing a celebration dinner. Apparently destroying corrupt lords warrants champagne and excessive amounts of food." The celebration was everything Catherine promised. Champagne, elaborate courses, and a guest list of everyone who'd supported their fight against Pembroke. Thorne attended, along with several parliamentary members who'd escaped implication in the scandal. Even some of Elena's father's old colleagues appeared, offering condolences and congratulations in equal measure. "Your father would have been proud," Senator Blackwood told her, his eyes damp. "Michael spent years fighting that kind of corruption. Knowing his daughter finished what he started, he'd have loved that." Elena accepted their tributes with grace, but the real satisfaction came later, when she and Ronan finally escaped to a quiet corner of Catherine's garden. "Too many people?" he asked, reading her expression. "Too much attention. I know I asked for visibility, but this is exhausting." She leaned against him, grateful for his solidity. "I just want to go home. We leave tomorrow. Back to Greymore. Back to quiet. Back to figuring out what our life looks like now." "What do you think it looks like?" Ronan considered. "Well, you're still technically obligated to produce an heir eventually, though I'm willing to delay that particular duty until we're both ready for the horror of parenthood." Elena laughed. "How romantic. I also thought you might want to establish some kind of foundation. Use your platform and resources to help other people in situations like you were. People being exploited by powerful predators who think they're untouchable." She straightened, looking at him. "That's actually brilliant. A legal aid fund, maybe. Help people get justice when they can't afford lawyers or protection. Name it after your father. Make sure his work continues." Tears pricked Elena's eyes again. "When did you become so thoughtful?" "I've always been thoughtful. I just hide it under layers of trauma and antisocial behavior." He pulled her closer. "But you're making me want to be better, less broken, more human. It's terrifying and inconvenient, but also good." "I love you," Elena said, surprising herself. The words had just appeared, true and undeniable. Ronan went very still. "What?" "I love you. I know we started this as a transaction, and we've only been actually married for a few weeks, but I love you. Your stubbornness and your hidden kindness and the way you protect people while pretending you don't care." She took a breath. "You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." "Elena." His voice was rough. "I don't know if I remember how to love someone. I'm not sure I have that left in me." "Somos." "That's okay. I have enough for both of us right now." He cupped her face in his hands, his expression full of something that looked like wonder and fear and desperate hope. "You're the bravest person I've ever met, and the most recklessly optimistic. And I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway." "Is that a yes?" You guys. "Yes, that's a give me time and I'll get there." He kissed her, deep and thorough. "But I can tell you this, you're the first person in 4 years who's made me want to live instead of just survive. That's not nothing." "It's everything," Elena whispered. They stood in the garden as night fell over Ashenmere, two broken people learning how to be whole together, building something fragile and precious from the ashes of their separate catastrophes. 6 months later, Elena stood in Greymoor's library, now also serving as the headquarters for the Whitford Foundation for Legal Aid, reviewing applications from people seeking help. Her staff consisted of 3 lawyers, 2 investigators, and Mrs. Bramble, who'd taken on administrative duties with terrifying efficiency. Ronan entered carrying 2 cups of tea, a ritual they'd developed over the long winter. "How many cases today?" 14 applications. 6 look promising: corruption, abuse of power, the usual aristocratic sins. Elena accepted the tea gratefully. "We might actually make a difference." "You already have. 3 successful prosecutions in 6 months, 2 corrupt officials removed from office, and 1 very satisfying headline calling you the People's Duchess." He leaned against the desk. "How does it feel?" "Good. Purposeful." She smiled. "Turns out destroying 1 corrupt lord gave me a taste for it. You're terrifying when you're righteous. I love it." The words came easily now. They'd both worked hard to get there, talking through nightmares, sharing histories, learning each other's damage, and deciding it was manageable. Ronan still had bad days when the war ghosts were too loud, and Elena still woke sometimes from dreams of drowning. But they'd learned to weather those storms together. "Catherine's visiting next week," Elena said. "She wants to discuss the Foundation's expansion." "Just..." "What?" "Of course she does." She can't resist meddling. But Ronan's tone was affectionate. Catherine had been surprisingly hands-off after the trial, giving them space to build their marriage without her interference. Though she'd made it clear she expected progress on the heir situation within a reasonable time frame. "We should probably talk about that," Elena said carefully. "About Catherine's meddling?" "About the heir situation. We've been married almost a year. The annulment option expires in 6 weeks." Ronan set down his tea, his expression serious. Do you want to annul? Because if you do, I'll honor our agreement. No questions, no guilt. Do you want to? I asked you first. Eek. Elena stood, moving to face him directly. I don't want an annulment. I want to stay married to you. Actually married, not just legally bound. I want to build a life here, run the foundation. Maybe eventually have children who don't inherit quite so much trauma from their parents. That's a tall order. We're both tall order people. She took his hands. But I need to know you want this too. Not because Catherine forced you or because it's convenient, but because you actually want a future with me. Ronan pulled her close, his expression soft in a way she'd learned meant he was about to be honest in a way that scared him. I wake up every morning and my first thought is whether you're still here or if this whole thing was a dream. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm terrified I'll somehow ruin it. But yes, I want this. I want you and our life, and whatever chaos you drag me into next. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. Bo? I'm working on it. Give me another year and I might manage actual poetry. She kissed him, deep and sure, tasting tea and promise. I love you. I love you too. He said it easier now, the words less terrifying each time. So, no annulment. We're actually doing this. We're actually doing this. Then I suppose we should discuss the heir situation. For Catherine's sake, obviously. Elena laughed. Obviously. Very selfless of us. I'm nothing if not selfless. His hand slid to her waist. Though perhaps we should practice first. Make sure we get it right. That seems responsible. They moved toward their shared quarters, separate rooms abandoned months ago in favor of sleeping in the same bed, waking up tangled together, building intimacy from proximity and trust. Making love had been awkward at first, both of them carrying damage that made vulnerability difficult. But they'd learned each other slowly, carefully, with patience and occasional laughter when things didn't go as planned. Now it was easy. Natural. Ronan's hands on her skin, her fingers in his hair, both of them breathing hard and close and alive in ways that felt like resurrection. Afterwards, wrapped in sheets and each other, Elena traced the scar on Ronan's face. He let her now, the old defensiveness gone. What happened? She asked softly. In the war. You never told me. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, ambush. My entire unit caught in a canyon with enemy forces on the ridges. They picked us off methodically. We couldn't retreat, couldn't advance, just had to endure it and hope reinforcements arrived in time. Did they? Eventually, but by then, half my men were dead. I took shrapnel to the face, lost consciousness, woke up in a field hospital surrounded by survivors asking why I hadn't saved them. His voice was flat, reciting facts to avoid feeling them. The scar's just the visible damage. The real injury is knowing I led good people into a trap and couldn't protect them. Elena kissed the scar gently. You survived. That's not failure. Feels like it sometimes. I know, but you're here, and you're using that survival to protect people who can't protect themselves. That has to count for something. It counts for you. Everything counts when it's for you. He pulled her closer. You make the guilt bearable. Make living feel like something more than just punishment for outlasting everyone else. Good, because you make me feel safe enough to be dangerous, to fight back instead of just surviving. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. We're good for each other. We really are. Terrifying thought. They fell asleep like that. Two damaged people holding each other through the night, their separate traumas woven together into something that looked like healing. The annulment deadline passed without comment. Elena and Ronan remained married, the transaction that had started their relationship transforming into something real and chosen. They worked side by side running the foundation, traveled occasionally to Ashenmere for political functions, and slowly built a life that felt permanent. Catherine visited regularly, her satisfaction at her matchmaking success barely concealed. Pembroke remained in prison, his empire dismantled, his name synonymous with corruption. The political landscape had shifted, younger reformers filling positions once held by his cronies. And in Greymoor's northern fortress, the Duke and Duchess built something that felt like home. 2 years after that desperate night in the rain, Elena stood in the same library where she'd first confronted Ronan, now holding a letter from Thorne. Pembroke had died in prison, heart failure, the report said, though rumors suggested one of his former allies had arranged something more deliberate. Either way, he was gone. Truly, finally gone. She showed the letter to Ronan when he returned from inspecting the Northern Patrol routes he still maintained. "How do you feel?" he asked, reading it. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, but mostly I just feel tired. Like I've been holding my breath for years and can finally exhale." "That sounds about right." He set the letter aside. "He's gone. You're safe. We can stop looking over our shoulders. What do we look at instead?" Ronan smiled, pulling her close. "Forward. We look forward." "Ji?" And they did. The foundation grew, helping dozens of people fight corruption and abuse of power. Elena became a voice for reform in parliamentary circles, using her platform to push for accountability. Ronan stepped back into public life gradually, his war trauma still present but manageable with Elena's support. They had children eventually, 2 daughters who inherited their mother's determination and their father's strategic mind. Greymore stopped feeling like a fortress and started feeling like a home, filled with laughter and life instead of isolation. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Elena would stand at the library window and remember the girl who'd fled through rain with stolen documents in desperate hope. That girl had been so scared, so convinced she wouldn't survive the week. But she had survived. More than survived. She'd fought back, destroyed her predator, and built a life worth living from the ashes of everything she'd lost. Ronan found her there one evening, their youngest daughter asleep on his shoulder, their elder playing with blocks by the fire. "Regrets?" he asked, echoing their conversation from years ago. Elena looked at him, this man who'd been forced to marry her, who'd learned to love her, who'd become her partner in every sense that mattered. Looked at their children, their life, the good they were doing in the world. "Not a single one," she said, and she meant it. Every desperate choice, every terrified moment, every impossible decision had led her here, to safety, to purpose, to love. The girl who'd crashed into a carriage to escape death had found something better than survival. She'd found home. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, gentle, nothing like that storm-drenched night that had changed everything. Elena listened to it tap against the windows and smiled. Some storms destroy you. Others wash you clean and leave you ready to rebuild. She'd been lucky enough to survive both kinds. And in the fortress that had once felt like a prison, surrounded by the family she'd built from necessity and choice and stubborn hope, Elena Whitford, the Duchess of Greymore, destroyer of corrupt lords, champion of the powerless, finally allowed herself to rest. The war was over. The battles were won. What remained was the quiet, precious work of living, and she intended to do it brilliantly.